The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Before Rick and Morty turned interdimensional chaos into comedy, and Phineas and Ferb made science the blueprint for summer, Nickelodeon had its very own pint-sized prodigy, Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Airing from 2002 to 2006, this animated gem mixed visual humor with high-concept sci-fi, following the adventures and frequent disasters sparked by a 10-year-old inventor whose brain was as big as his hair. So, whether you were rooting for Jimmy's wild experiments, Sheen's obsession with Ultralord, or Carl's allergic mishaps, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron wasn't just a cartoon. It was a clever crash course in curiosity, friendship, and the chaos of being the smartest kid in the world. In this video, I will take you back to the good old times as I explore the complete lore of the series. And if you appreciate the efforts, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such cartoon awesomeness.
Okay, Pants, let's see how you like a little taste of a Neutron.
Season 1, Episode 1, When Pants Attack. Jimmy's mom, Judy, once again got on his case about the mess in his room, especially the pants on the floor. To teach him a lesson, she grounded him from going to the movies until his room was spotless. But Jimmy, being the boy genius he is, figured he could outsmart a simple chore. He created a nanochip and implanted it in his pants so they would clean themselves up. The plan worked perfectly at first. Judy lifted his punishment, and Jimmy felt like a hero. But that night, as he slept, the pants in his closet began to spark and twitch. The nanochip had a malfunction, granting the pants sentience. The pants, now rogue, began to expand their influence, controlling other pairs of pants all over Retroville. Soon, Carl's, Sheen's, Cindy's, and many other people's pants were marching to their own beat. Embarrassment struck as the pants went into pants invasion mode, stripping people of their bottoms. Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, and Cindy were all caught pantsless in public, creating a hilarious and shocking scene for the rest of the town. Realizing he had gone too far, Jimmy knew he had to act fast. He tracked the rogue pants to the House of Blue Pants, a massive store that served as their headquarters. With the help of Goddard and his friends, Jimmy came up with a final plan. Using static cling, he was able to shut down the nanochip's influence, saving the day and restoring everyone's pants. In the end, Judy added one last punishment. Jimmy had to pick up all the runaway pants scattered across town. It was a firm reminder that sometimes the simplest solution, like just picking up your pants, is the best one.
It's headed straight for us!
Episode 2, Normal Boy and Birth of a Salesman. Normal Boy. Jimmy Neutron grew tired of his own genius. His intelligence made him feel different, and he longed to be normal. His frustrations reached a breaking point after his latest invention, the JuiceBot 3000, went haywire, launching pots and pans into space and causing a huge mess in the kitchen. Upset, his mum, Judy, sighed, wishing he weren't such a genius. Feeling misunderstood, Jimmy went to school and watched his friends, Carl and Sheen, playing without a care in the world. He saw Cindy, annoyed as usual by his attention-grabbing intellect, and decided he'd had enough. He built the Brain Drain 8000, a device designed to lower his IQ so he could finally fit in. Carl and Sheen cheered him on, and Jimmy reassured them he could always reverse the process. But the device malfunctioned, draining his intelligence completely. The next day at school, Jimmy's answers in class were hilariously wrong, and Cindy revelled in having the spotlight. Unbeknownst to everyone, a meteor hurtled toward Retroville, and without his genius, Jimmy was oblivious. Realizing the danger, Cindy, despite her rivalry with him, fiddled with the brain drain settings and zapped him back to normal. With his intellect restored, Jimmy quickly gathered magnetic plates from a science fair display. He used them to create a powerful repulsion field, diverting the meteor and saving the town.
I here for this strapping young lad, large of head, broad of brain.
I'll give you 25 cents!
Birth of a Salesman. Jimmy invented book gum, a special gum that lets you absorb the knowledge of a whole book just by chewing it. He proudly showed it to Carl, Sheen, Cindy, and Libby, but not without a warning. Chewing more than one piece was dangerous. The class was then challenged to a candy selling contest, with the winner earning a VIP trip to Retroland. Both Jimmy and Cindy were determined to win. Jimmy's fact-based sales pitch for his chocolate failed, while Cindy's emotional appeal did better. To get an edge, Jimmy created the Willy Loman 3000, a robot salesman. The robot quickly spun out of control. It began automatically selling candy and then auctioned off Jimmy's other inventions and even Jimmy himself. When Jimmy found out, he raced to stop the robot from selling off his lab. In a last-ditch effort, he gave the robot 6 pieces of book gum. Overloaded from the sheer amount of knowledge, the robot literally gummed up and short-circuited. Eventually, the contest was declared a tie. Both Jimmy and Cindy won the trip to Retroland, but neither was excited about sharing the victory.
Ah! So what are we gonna do now, Jimmy?
Episode 3, Brobot and the Big Pinch. Brobot, Jimmy felt a pang of loneliness. His best friends, Carl and Sheen, were busy, leaving him with no one to help test his latest inventions. When he saw Butch playing with his younger brother in the park, Jimmy had an idea. He needed a little brother of his own. He approached his parents, Judy and Hugh, with the request. They were taken aback, warning him that having another child was a lot more complicated than he thought. Dissatisfied with their response, Jimmy took matters into his own hands and went to his lab. He constructed a robot little brother, a miniature version of himself, which he named Brobot. At first, Brobot was everything Jimmy had hoped for. The two of them tested inventions, played sports, and Brobot's cheerful, boundless energy made him the perfect companion. However, things quickly soured. Brobot began stealing Jimmy's thunder. He was better at inventing, became more popular with Jimmy's friends, and even charmed Cindy and Libby. Brobot's constant need for attention made Jimmy feel neglected and annoyed. Fed up, Jimmy attempted to deactivate his creation, but he couldn't bring himself to do it when he saw Brobot's upset reaction. In the end, Jimmy decided on a new plan. He arranged for Brobot to live with his new robot parents, Mombot and Popbot, who could better keep up with his energy. While Jimmy kept his distance, he still watched over Brobot, proving that despite the frustration, he still cared for his robot brother.
Hey, what happened to the music?
I got it covered, dudes.
The Big Pinch. In class, Jimmy and Cindy got into a heated argument about who invented the radio. Cindy claimed it was Marconi in 1870, but Jimmy, certain he was right, decided to settle the debate once and for all. He activated his time pincher and brought Thomas Edison to the present. At first, the plan worked. Edison confirmed Jimmy's side of the argument, but things took a strange turn when Edison began to flirt with their teacher, Miss Fowle, and convinced her to leave class with him. Since Edison was no longer in his own time, history was being altered, electrical devices all over Retroville started to malfunction and disappear, a direct consequence of Edison's absence. Jimmy quickly realized the gravity of the situation. All things that ran on electricity were failing. Jimmy tried to persuade Edison to go back, but Edison was having too much fun with Miss Fowle, so Jimmy came up with a new plan. He used one of his inventions, a voice-disguising walkie-talkie, to fake an insult from Edison to Ms. Fowle. The misunderstanding worked, and Ms. Fowle, heartbroken, reminded Edison of his responsibilities to the world. Realizing his mistake, Edison agreed to return to his time, restoring electrical history and bringing everything back to normal.
Of course, what do I know? After 60, your sense of taste completely disappears.
Granny?
Episode 4, Granny Baby and Time is Money. Granny Baby. With Judy and Hugh Neutron away on their honeymoon, Jimmy was left in charge of the house and his grandmother, Granny Neutron. His parents made him promise not to experiment on her, but Jimmy couldn't resist a good invention. Tired of her endless rambling stories, he created a youth tonic to make her feel younger. He secretly poured the potion into her medicine, hoping for a quick fix. Instead of making her young again, the concoction de-aged Granny into a talking baby, though her personality remained the same. Chaos ensued, as Jimmy suddenly had to care for a diaper-wearing, crying baby who demanded attention. He was so embarrassed that he initially tried to handle everything himself, but the situation became too much. He eventually had to swallow his pride and ask Cindy for help changing the baby's diaper and retrieving supplies. Meanwhile, a curious crowd began to gather, fascinated by the talking baby. Jimmy scrambled to create an antidote. Just as his parents were pulling up, the baby-fied Granny drank the antidote from a baby bottle and instantly returned to her normal, elderly self. There was one last twist. Carl accidentally drank some of the antidote, temporarily aging him into an old man. The episode ended with a hilarious scene of Carl and Granny dancing together. A perfectly bizarre conclusion to Jimmy's failed experiment.
Mom, Dad?
Yeah, I don't care if he is my dad. Life-saving operations are expensive.
Time is money. Jimmy spotted a TV advertisement for the Encyclopedia of Infinite Knowledge, a massive 1,000-volume set that was incredibly expensive. When his mom, Judy, refused to buy it, his dad, Hugh, mentioned a missed investment opportunity from 15 years ago in McSpanky's burger factory that could have made them rich. Seizing the chance, Jimmy, along with Carl and Sheen, used his time booth to travel back in time. Their mission was twofold: to convince a younger Hugh to invest in McSpanky's and to get him to buy the encyclopedia for Jimmy in the future. They succeeded, and upon returning to the present, their world had completely changed. The family was now incredibly wealthy, living in a massive, opulent house filled with expensive possessions. However, the newfound riches came at a cost. Judy and Hugh had become materialistic, cold, and distant. They treated Jimmy more like a luxury than a son, and their family bonds had withered. Realizing this wasn't the life he wanted, Jimmy and Goddard went back in time to reverse their actions, preventing Hugh from investing in McSpanky's. When they returned to their normal, humble home, the encyclopedia offer was still available. But this time, Jimmy declined, content with his family and the life he already had.
I'm tired, Jimmy. I want to go home.
Episode 5, Raise the Oozy Scab, and I Dream of Jimmy, Raise the Oozy Scab. For an oceanography project, Ms. Fowle assigned partners. Left without anyone, Jimmy and Cindy were begrudgingly paired up. Despite his frustration, Jimmy came up with an ambitious plan: to use his deep-sea submarine to locate treasure in the sunken pirate ship, the Oozy Scab, with the help of his new invention, the Gilgab 9000, a device that translates fish language. Jimmy tried to scare Cindy away by describing the cramped and dangerous submarine, but she insisted on joining. Along with Carl and Sheen, they set off on their underwater adventure. Jimmy's initial attempts to use the Gilgab to communicate with the fish failed, so Cindy took the lead with a map, guiding them to the wreck. Suddenly, a giant squid attacked. As Cindy pleaded for his help, Jimmy initially hesitated until she admitted he was the smarter, better partner. That was all he needed. He quickly realized that if he added fish snack M's to the Gilgab's chip, the squid, which had been eating fish, could understand the device. With their new form of communication, they managed to calm the squid and retrieve the treasure. Back in class, the treasure turned out to be a chest full of saltwater taffy. While Jimmy was disappointed, they still earned an A+. As Cindy teased him about the anticlimactic find, Jimmy could only lament the unexpected twist.
Plus, if it was a dream, could I do this?
I Dream of Jimmy. Carl's sleep and daily life were being terrorized by recurring nightmares. Determined to help his friend, Jimmy invented the Dream Injector 5000, a device that would allow him to enter Carl's dreams and confront the source of his fears. Inside the dream, the roles were reversed. Carl was the genius, and Jimmy was his test subject in a frightening experiment. Jimmy soon discovered that whatever happened in the dream had real-life physical repercussions. He traced the nightmares back to a terrifying monster shaped like a lima bean, Carl's most hated food. As the monster chased them, strange dream logic took over. In a moment of desperation, Jimmy decided to do something completely absurd to help Carl realize he was dreaming. He kissed Cindy. The shock of the illogical kiss was enough to break the dream's hold, and Carl woke up. But their relief was short-lived. The lima bean monster had escaped the dream machine and was now loose in Jimmy's lab. The three friends chased the monster down, and Jimmy finally took care of it with a hammer. The episode ended with a comedic mess. Giant slices of lima bean monster scattered everywhere. Jimmy's dad, Hugh, feeling sick after claiming to have eaten a bolt, and Cindy fuming about the dream kiss. Despite the chaos, Carl was finally free of his nightmares.
Yeah! Sacrifice Jimmy!
Children, please!
Episode 6, Jimmy on Ice and Battle of the Band. Jimmy on Ice. On a sweltering day in Retroville, Jimmy, Carl and Sheen were struggling with the heat. Their misery only grew as they watched Cindy and Libby happily splashing around in a pool. Inspired to solve the problem for everyone, Jimmy created the SPF 9000, a super sunblock. He launched it into the atmosphere, hoping it would block just enough sunlight to cool things down. The plan worked almost too well. It started snowing, and the town rejoiced, enjoying the sudden winter wonderland. But their excitement was short-lived as the temperature continued to plummet. Jimmy's invention had triggered a full-blown ice age. The townspeople regressed into a primal state. Adults began hunting like cavemen, and some even suggested sacrificing Jimmy to calm the elements. Retroville became a frozen and dangerous landscape. Just in time, Jimmy had a realization. The sunblock was not waterproof. He rallied everyone, explaining that they could break down the cloud with moisture. He led them in a high-energy effort to generate as much sweat as possible, which would then rise into the atmosphere. With an immense amount of perspiration, they successfully degraded the SPF 9000 cloud, and the sun's warmth returned, restoring Retroville's climate. Everyone was grateful, but they were also thoroughly grossed out by the sheer amount of sweat it took to save the day. Battle of the Band. Ms. Fowl announced the school talent show, and Jimmy, Carl and Sheen decided to form a band to compete. Their real motivation was to beat Cindy and Libby, who had a perfectly choreographed river stomp dance routine. To ensure their victory, Jimmy created the Neutronic synchronous mind instruments, which played music based on what the band members were thinking. They named their band the Llama Lords of Science, a name they all had different feelings about. Their early performances were a huge success, garnering cheers and attention. But with success came a huge dose of ego. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen started arguing over who should get the solos, what the band's name should be, and who deserved more of the spotlight. The night of the talent show, their tensions reached a fever pitch. In a fit of anger, they smashed their instruments just before their performance. Without their instruments, they were forced to improvise. Carl used his inhaler to blow an enormous nose bubble, which Jimmy and Sheen held onto, floating above the stage. The crowd reacted with a mix of disgust and awe at their strange and gross spectacle. Their act was messy and memorable, but it landed them in last place. Despite being the 8th act, they finished in 8th place, and Cindy and Libby took first.
Forever. Running around. That's it.
Episode 7. See Jimmy Run and Trading Faces. See Jimmy Run. Jimmy, fed up with always losing relay races to Cindy, decided to take matters into his own hands. He invented a pair of super running shoes, coated with a special compound that gave him abnormal speed. With the shoes, he finally started winning, but he soon discovered a side effect. When he ran fast enough, the shoes made him almost invisible. He began using this new ability to pull pranks on Cindy, messing with her jump rope and embarrassing her in front of other students. What started as a joke soon became a serious problem. The invention malfunctioned, and Jimmy couldn't stop running. Trapped in a state of perpetual speed, he tried to get help from Carl and Sheen, but they couldn't see or hear him. In a desperate attempt to get their attention, he wrote "Help Jimmy" on the ground. People mistook it for evidence of a ghost, and the town erupted in a panic. Finally, Jimmy thought of a way to free himself. He spun around on playground equipment until the shoes slipped off. His molecules reassembled, but he was left looking like a glowing purple gel blob. His friends were grossed out, but also impressed by his strange new form. He eventually returned to normal, learning that winning at all costs wasn't worth the messy consequences.
This badly dressed body just as much as you do. Badly dressed?
Trading Faces. After Cindy humiliated him with a well-timed prank, using a hidden boombox to play embarrassing music, Jimmy decided he'd had enough. He set out to build the Mind Phone, a device that could read minds, and also, he hoped, would help him predict Cindy's next move. One night, while he was working on the invention, a sudden thunderstorm caused a power surge that struck his lab. As a result, Jimmy and Cindy's minds were switched, and they found themselves in each other's bodies. Now, in unfamiliar territory, the two rivals took advantage of the situation to prank one another and cause chaos at school. Cindy, in Jimmy's body, acted completely out of character, while Jimmy, in Cindy's body, finally got a taste of what it was like to be on the receiving end of her constant teasing. During class, Jimmy, as Cindy, discovered Cindy's next prank plan, a paint bomb hidden in his desk, and managed to turn the tables, making it backfire on Cindy herself. In another twist, Jimmy, in Cindy's body, rejected a concert invitation from Nick, which left Cindy's friends completely bewildered. By the end of the day, with the help of a perfectly timed lightning strike, they were back in their own bodies. Having experienced each other's lives, they both walked away with a new understanding. Jimmy finally saw things from Cindy's perspective, and Cindy, in turn, gained a bit of empathy for him.
What's that smell?
Episode 8, The Phantom of Retroland and My Son, the Hamster, The Phantom of Retroland. On Show and Tell Day, Jimmy brought in a model of a Foucault's pendulum to demonstrate a point about physics. But his scientific presentation was overshadowed when Nick told a spooky urban legend about the Phantom of Retroland, a ghost monster that supposedly haunted the amusement park after dark. Jimmy, dismissing it as a hoax, announced he would prove the Phantom wasn't real. That night, he, Carl and Sheen snuck into Retroland. To fool his parents, Jimmy used a hologram projector to create a fake image of himself sleeping in his bed. The device malfunctioned, though, showing his parents an image of him on the school playground, a clear sign he had snuck out. Inside the park, they encountered multiple phantoms. The first was Nick, trying to play a trick on them. Then, Cindy and Libby appeared, disguised as another phantom, hoping to teach Jimmy a lesson about his arrogance. Finally, his parents, Judy and Hugh, showed up in a clumsy attempt to scare him for sneaking out. Just as they were all about to leave, the real Phantom of Retroland appeared, a glowing, translucent figure that terrified everyone. It was proof that some things in the universe couldn't be explained by science.
It's working! Get ready, Carl!
My Son, the Hamster. Jimmy's latest project involved experimenting with his new teleportation pods. While he was in the lab, Carl came over, bringing his new hamster, Mr. Wuggles. In a stroke of bad luck, a mishap occurred with the device, and Jimmy's atoms got mixed up with the hamster's. Jimmy ended up in Mr. Wuggles' furry little body, and Mr. Wuggles was left with Jimmy's head on his tiny body. Unaware of the mix-up, Jimmy's dad, Hugh, decided to take Mr. Wuggles out for a day of father-son bonding, leading to a series of bizarre and confusing events. Meanwhile, Jimmy, now trapped in a hamster's body, had to evade Goddard and other household dangers just to get to his lab. At one point, a hawk even swooped down and grabbed him. He eventually found his way back, and with the help of Carl and Sheen, they managed to lure Mr. Wuggles back to the lab. They all worked together to get them into the pods and reverse the switch, restoring them to their proper bodies. The episode ended with a hilarious bit of comic relief. Sheen, intrigued by the technology, suggested using the teleportation pods to switch bodies with a lizard, so he could be the Lizard Lord, causing a terrified Carl to run away.
Are you conducting a secret meeting? Is this a conspiracy to start a riot? Up against the walls!
Episode 9, Hall Monster and Hypno Birthday to You, Hall Monster. When the school's hall monitor, Chuck Lester, moved away, Ms. Fowl held a drawing to find his replacement. To his disbelief, Jimmy's name was pulled from the hat. He thought it was the worst idea, but Principal Willoughby convinced him to accept the position, telling him that even Albert Einstein once held the job. Reluctantly, Jimmy agreed. Once on the job, Jimmy embraced his new role with a newfound seriousness. He invented a range of gadgets to enforce the rules, including the Hall Pass Authenticator, Vetrotech scanners, and other surveillance tools. He began issuing demerits for even the smallest infractions: chewing gum, stickers on lockers, or pants that were too short. His strict regime caused a rift between him and his friends, Carl, Sheen, Libby, and Cindy, who were growing tired of his tyrannical rules. With his friends and classmates turning against him, Jimmy's dad, Hugh, gave him a stern warning about abusing his power. Realizing he had gone too far, Jimmy concocted a plan to get himself fired. He began intentionally breaking every rule he had so meticulously enforced. Ms. Fowl, witnessing his blatant disregard for the rules, had no choice but to fire him. With his reign of terror over, Sheen was appointed the new Ultra Monitor, and Jimmy's time as Hall Monitor came to an end.
That'll do just fine.
Hey, no!
Hypno Birthday to You. Jimmy was desperate for a new chemistry kit to build a hypercube, but his birthday was still months away. Impatient, he used his hypno-beam to trick his parents, Hugh and Judy, into thinking the next day was his birthday. The plan worked, but a malfunction caused the hypnosis to become permanent. Hugh and Judy now believed every day was Jimmy's birthday. What started as fun, endless parties, gifts, and a perpetually hired clown quickly devolved into chaos. The clown, in a moment of absurdity, accidentally destroyed the hypno-beam, breaking the hypnosis. Suddenly, his parents snapped back to reality, realizing what Jimmy had done. To teach him a lesson, they decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. They pretended he was turning 18 and had to leave for college, making Jimmy feel incredibly guilty. To make matters worse, the clown service sent the family a massive bill for all the non-stop parties. To pay off the debt, Jimmy was forced to spend his entire summer scrubbing the school floors.
People, listen to me! It's just candy!
Episode 10, Crunch Time and Substitute Creature. Crunch Time. Jimmy was at his wits' end watching Carl's endless memory experiments, which involved doors, cheese, and electric shocks. Later, at the candy bar, he was annoyed by Carl and Sheen's inability to choose just one flavour. That's when inspiration struck. He would create a single, mega candy that combined every flavour and texture imaginable: sweet, crunchy, sour, gummy, and nutty. His initial attempts were a disaster. The early candies tasted awful and came with bizarre side effects, like growing whiskers or even blowing up. After countless trials, he finally created the perfect candy, a small purple treat with yellow spots that was absolutely delicious. He brought a bag of it to school and everyone became obsessed. The demand quickly grew and the entire town, including his parents and Sam at the candy bar, became addicted to his creation. They began to act like hungry zombies, craving more. Realizing he had created a monster, Jimmy cut off the supply, but the mob wanted more. To break their addiction, he rigged his candy supply to deliver a small electric shock with each bite. The painful experience caused most people to throw the candy away, and the town returned to normal. Only Sheen seemed to enjoy the candy, savouring the painful yet delicious experience.
Is that you, Ernest Abercrombie?
Substitute Creature. For his botany project, Jimmy brought a 64-million-year-old spinach specimen to school. The plant, which he had cloned and preserved, was part of his plan to use his DNA accelerator to enhance its age. During his presentation, a few seed pods from the mutated plant flew into Ms. Fowl's mouth, instantly transforming her into a giant, rampaging plant monster. The colossal Ms. Fowl stomped her way through town, heading directly for the local toaster convention. Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen, with the help of Goddard, quickly scrambled to find a way to reverse the mutation. Jimmy came up with a bold plan. He would use a new toaster that his dad, Hugh, had just bought to toast the DNA accelerator, which would then launch into Ms. Fowl's mouth and reverse the mutation. After a chaotic chase that involved giant plant monster destruction and pursued planes, Jimmy successfully managed to shrink Ms. Fowl back to her normal size. Just when they thought it was all over, Carl accidentally ate some leftover seed pods and also grew big and leafy, though thankfully he wasn't rampaging. The class learned that it was the accidental mutation of the seed pods that caused the whole disaster. Humbled by the experience, Jimmy reflected on the unexpected consequences of his experiment.
Sorry, Miss Fowl! Jim Jack, stop that!
He said stop her.
Episode 11. Safety First and Crime Sheen Investigation. Safety First. Jimmy had a big problem. The school bully, Terry Finster, kept stealing his lunch and making his life miserable. Instead of finding a different solution, Jimmy built a bodyguard out of nanobots to protect him from any and all harm. At first, the nanobots worked perfectly, but they were unable to tell the difference between a bully and a friend. The nanobots started to see Jimmy's friends as a threat and acted aggressively toward them. Jimmy realized he had a moral issue on his hands. He couldn't have a bodyguard who hurt his friends. He knew he had to find a way to deactivate his invention without alienating the people he cared about. Finally, when the nanobots went too far, Jimmy shut them down completely. The experience taught him a valuable lesson about seeking help from others rather than over-engineering a solution all by himself.
Sure you won't mind submitting to a lie detector test. Goddard?
Crime Sheen investigation. Sheen was in a panic. His beloved Ultra Lord action figure had vanished. Desperate, he turned to Jimmy to solve the mystery. Embracing the persona of Sherlock Holmes, with Carl as his bumbling Watson, Jimmy set out to find the missing toy. Using his Nutroscope, a device that could identify who had been near the scene of the crime, they quickly narrowed down the suspects to Cindy, his mom Judy, Nick, and a squirrel. They began their interrogations. Cindy was the obvious suspect. Judy's alibi was questioned, and Nick was considered, but none of them seemed to be a perfect fit. Jimmy, using clever deduction, noticed that Carl's notebook was filled with sketches of squirrels. He realized that the least likely suspect might be the correct one. The clues led them to a nearby squirrel's den where they found Ultra Lord being used as a nutcracker. Sheen was relieved to have his toy back, even though it was a little worse for wear. Jimmy, pleased with his successful detective work, explained that once you rule out the impossible, whatever is left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. The mystery was solved, and Ultra Lord was home, albeit with a few gnaw marks.
Pretend that Ultra Lord just got cancelled.
Episode 12. Journey to the center of Carl and our wilderness. Journey to the center of Carl. Mighty tired of school, Jimmy invented the sick patch, a device that could make him legitimately ill and then, when removed, would instantly make him feel well again. He put the patch on, convincing his mum, Judy, to let him stay home. Once she left, he took the patch off and enjoyed a lazy day. Word of his invention quickly spread, and soon every kid in class wanted one. Ms. Fowle's classroom was empty as all her students faked being sick. This caused a panic among the parents, who resorted to bizarre home remedies like acupuncture and pepper nose treatments. To make matters worse, Jimmy's dad, Hugh, decided to start homeschooling him. The situation escalated when the sick patch began to dissolve, infecting the bloodstream of anyone who had used it. Removing the patch was no longer a quick fix. The sickness lingered. To find a cure, Jimmy and Sheen shrank themselves and journeyed inside Carl's body. They navigated his bloodstream, battling germs and extracting their mitochondria to reverse the illness. After the mission, all the kids were cured and happy to be back in school. Jimmy admitted he was glad to be back in the classroom, and the rest of the kids vowed never to want a fake sick day again. Wilderness! Hugh dragged Jimmy, Carl and Sheen on a camping trip, insisting on a strict no-technology rule. Jimmy had little choice but to agree, since Hugh had some embarrassing photos he could use for blackmail. From the start, the trip was a disaster. Hugh discarded essential supplies, got lost, and admitted he was a terrible camper. Carl and Sheen suffered through the discomfort, and the boys' patience wore thin. One night, the chaos escalated when a bear appeared, trapping them on a cliff. With danger looming, Jimmy took charge. He instructed Hugh, Sheen and Carl to distract the bear while he lit a fire. Just when it seemed the bear would catch them, Goddard arrived, scaring the bear away and rescuing them. Their timely rescue was orchestrated by Judy, who had picked up on their distress. They gave up on roughing it in the deep wilderness and decided to set up a camp in the backyard instead. Despite all the misadventures, the experience had a positive outcome. Even though Hugh wasn't a perfect outdoorsman, the boys' respect for their dad grew stronger. The trip, in its own way, brought them closer together. Episode 13. Party at Neutron's and Ultra Sheen. Party at Neutron's. Jimmy is at home alone for the evening. His parents are going out to see Ducks, the musical. Before leaving, Judy and Hugh make Jimmy sign a contract promising no parties, no experiments, no inviting people over. Later, Carl and Sheen show up at Jimmy's door. Not seeing his parents, they suggest he break the contract and throw a party. Jimmy resists at first, but when Sheen points out Betty Quinlan might come, and since the contract didn't explicitly forbid someone else inviting people over, Jimmy reluctantly agrees. The party grows quickly, with many classmates arriving. Nick, Cindy, Libby, etc. Chaos ensues. Nick gets bored, tries to leave, and Sheen blocks the door so no one leaves. Guests explore Jimmy's gadgets. The jetpack gets used for flying, the shrink ray shrinks Carl, and Sheen accidentally releases a velociraptor into the house, mistaking it for a magician's trick. Jimmy eventually regains control enough to trap the raptor and restore Carl. Then Betty shows up, and Jimmy can't resist resuming the party, even as the house is falling apart around them. When Jimmy's parents call to say they'll be home soon because of an accident at the musical, Jimmy panics. To wrap everything up quickly, he uses his time accelerator to speed up time inside the house so the party ends, everyone leaves, and he cleans up before his parents return. At the end, Hugh opens the closet to hang his coat and is chased by the still hiding velociraptor. Jimmy doesn't quite manage a total cleanup, but his parents don't immediately detect the disaster.
Transform Ultra Sheen into Mega Ultra Sheen!
Ultra Sheen. In the second half, Jimmy unveils a new gadget, the Neutronic Game Pyramid. It lets players literally enter their favourite video game. Sheen brings over his beloved game Ultra Lord versus Robo Fiend Mega Battle and is transported into it. Once inside, Sheen struggles early, getting defeated by Robo Fiend. Jimmy enters to help, but Carl, thinking it's all just a game, raises the difficulty to a much harder level. The stakes escalate. She's trapped unless they beat the levels. Jimmy and Sheen need a power boost, which comes from the Ultra Crystal. Robo Fiend gets one and transforms into Mega Robo Fiend. Jimmy finds another and throws it to Sheen, allowing him to become Mega Ultra Sheen. They battle. Eventually, Sheen's victory comes about through an absurd weakness of Robo Fiend. Being lactose intolerant, Sheen sprays milk in Robo Fiend's face, which incapacitates it. The villain explodes, and Ultra Lord makes a triumphant appearance, complete with his catchphrase. Jimmy and Sheen return to reality. Carl, still in the game world, is left behind temporarily. The segment ends with a comedic note. Sheen asks Jimmy if he has any baloney.
That does it!
Episode 14, Broadcast Blues and Professor Calamitous, I presume. Broadcast Blues. Jimmy landed his own TV show, Science with Jimmy, on the school's public access channel. He planned to make it an educational show, but things got complicated when Principal Willoughby made Cindy the producer. Cindy, along with Libby and Brittany, decided to amp up the entertainment, turning it into funky jam dance party with some science. All music, dancing and flash with very little science. To fight back, Jimmy invented devices like the Acoustivac to stop their musical interruptions and the Gravitrax SK30 to show off gravity experiments. But every time he tried to do something scientific, the girls would override him with more spectacle. Even when he created a miniature live star, the audience was more interested in Nick's hair flip and dancing. Goddard, Jimmy's own dog, even joined in on the fun. Although the show's ratings soared, the network's new president hated the blend of science, music and dancing. The show was cancelled and replaced by Sheen's puppet show concept. Fuzzy puppet house party with no science. Watching at home with his parents, a frustrated Jimmy was told to just eat his popcorn. His attempt to make science entertaining had failed, and in the end, it was a puppet show that won out.
He's on our tail!
Professor Calamitous, I presume. Professor Finbar Calamitous, a brilliant but extremely scatterbrained scientist, had one major flaw. He could never finish anything he started. To force Jimmy to help him complete one of his inventions, Calamitous kidnapped Jimmy's robotic dog, Goddard. Jimmy tracked him down to his lair, where he had to outsmart Calamitous' flawed inventions and half-baked plans to rescue Goddard. In a comedic twist, Calamitous' robotic suit, which he had built but, in typical fashion, failed to complete, lacked a bathroom. This led to a desperate and ultimately hilarious subplot involving the professor's urgency. Jimmy, using his wits, foiled the villain's scheme, rescued Goddard, and escaped. As he retreated, Calamitous vowed revenge, promising that he would one day complete his plan. The experience taught Jimmy that even the most brilliant minds can be foiled not just by evil, but by their own flaws and a lack of follow-through. Episode 15. The Eggpire Strikes Back. Jimmy's suspicions lingered. He fired a tomato at the egg-shaped ship, causing it to crash and revealing the alien Yolkians, Gubot and Ublar. They claimed they had renounced their evil ways, blaming their past deeds on their monstrous goddess Poltra. The townspeople were easily swayed, but Jimmy remained skeptical, trying to expose their lies. Meanwhile, A competitive Cindy, eager to one-up Jimmy, was lured in by the Yolkians' promise of her own lab. She was tricked into helping them break into Jimmy's lab by bribing Carl and Sheen to reveal how his security system worked. Using a strand of Jimmy's hair, Goobot was able to bypass the security and steal Jimmy's DNA regenerator to resurrect Poltra. Though still distrusted by the town, Jimmy used Goddard's lie detector to confirm his suspicions. The Yolkians were lying. He then discovered their plan. The DNA regenerator would revive Poltra, who would then devour everyone at the welcome picnic the Yolkians had promised. On the day of the picnic, Jimmy tried to warn everyone, but they ignored him. It wasn't until Cindy realized her mistake and publicly defended him that the town finally listened. Together, they came up with a plan to stop Poltra. They built a dummy, filled Poltra's water dish with purple Flurp soda, and tricked her into eating the dummy, which was filled with Pop Rocks. The resulting chemical reaction caused Poltra to explode. Goobot and Ooblar escaped in their egg-shaped rocket, vowing revenge. The town apologized to Jimmy, and in a final act of good faith, he erased Cindy's short-term memory of how she helped the villains. Jimmy Neutron was once again a hero. Episode 16, Maximum Hue and Sleepless in Retroville. Maximum Hue. The annual parent-child games were coming up at Lindbergh Elementary, and the Neutron family was determined to finally beat the reigning champions, Cindy Vortex and her mother. Jimmy, however, doubted his dad Hugh had what it took to win. To give them an edge, he invented the Maximum Headband, a device designed to boost Hugh's performance to almost superhuman levels. On the day of the games, Hugh was a natural, astonishing everyone with his incredible feats. The competition between the Neutrons and Cindy's team, which, as it turned out, was actually her Aunt Susie in a disguise, was fierce. Just as things were heating up, they were caught. The Neutrons were disqualified for cheating, and Cindy and her aunt were disqualified for their disguise. As the disqualifications piled up, it became clear that nearly every team had cheated in some way. In the end, only Carl and his father, Ebenezer Weezer, remained. They had played by the rules and, despite their poor performance in every event, won the championship by default. The experience taught Jimmy a valuable lesson. Winning by cheating is hollow, and playing fair matters more.
Alright, this is it, guys.
Sleepless in Retroville. Carl and Sheen arrived at Jimmy's house for a sleepover, and Jimmy unveiled his latest invention, the Slumbertron 9000. The machine was designed for maximum sleepover fun, capable of creating perfect pizza, deploying pillows for fights, and even telling scary stories. They started with a high-tech pillow fight before enjoying the ultimate pizza. Then, they put the machine on Dr. Dark mode for a scary story. Everything was going great until Carl woke up later, craving more pizza. He tried to use the machine himself, but a syntax error occurred when he started pushing all the buttons in a panic. The Slumbertron went haywire, merging the pizza-making function with the scary story mode to create a monstrous, living pizza. The pizza monster, along with some pillow monsters, chased Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen through the house. Thinking fast, Jimmy came up with a plan. They had to make the monster believe that sunrise was coming, as monsters are afraid of daylight. Using a lantern and Carl's glasses, they created a convincing illusion of a rising sun. The monster retreated into its box and dissolved in the light. But then came the twist. It was all a dream, or rather, a dream within a dream. The final shot revealed that the pizza monster was having a dream about children, and his wife reminded him that there were no children.
All you kids be cool. Later.
Episode 17, Make Room for Daddy-O. Rehearsals for the 82nd annual Father's Day Follies were underway at Lindbergh Elementary. Parent-child pairs were getting ready for the big show. Cindy and her dad practiced a martial arts routine, while Libby and her dad prepared for a magic act that included the classic Saw the Lady in Half trick. Jimmy and his dad, Hugh, were supposed to perform a goofy, babyish number called the Ducky Daddles Dance Song. Embarrassed by the idea, Jimmy avoided rehearsals, leaving Hugh to practice alone and endure the teasing from Cindy and Libby. Determined to save his dad from humiliation, Jimmy went to his lab and created the Neutronic Dedorkinator, a device designed to suppress Hugh's dorky traits and replaced them with suave, cool dad characteristics. He zapped Hugh with the device, but at first it seemed to have no effect. However, the changes began to surface. Hugh ditched his old sweater vests for an Elvis-style rocker outfit, traded his car for a motorcycle, and started performing at the candy bar. He became a local celebrity, admired by everyone, and even started getting business opportunities. But with his growing fame came a new distance from Jimmy and the rest of the family. Hugh became arrogant and vain, uninterested in his old simple pleasures like ducks and pie. He was too cool for family time. Jimmy began to regret his decision. On the eve of the Father's Day follies, a talent agent offered Hugh a world tour. When Jimmy tried to reverse the changes, Hugh, afraid of losing his new identity, destroyed the Dodorkinator. Worried he might lose his dad forever, Jimmy snuck into Hugh's performance venue. He tried to fake a dangerous fall to trigger Hugh's fatherly instincts, but the plan failed. Just when it seemed Jimmy was in real danger as the safety net broke, Hugh's true instincts took over. He saved Jimmy, and in doing so, he reverted to his old, dorky self. Finally, Hugh chose family over fame. He and Jimmy performed the Ducky Daddles dance together at the Father's Day Follies, with Jimmy finally embracing his dad for who he really was.
I might be able to lose them by using a hyperthrust.
Episode 18, A Beautiful Mine. In Cindy's backyard, as she trained in karate with Libby as her coach, a meteor came crashing down. Inside the fiery rock, they discovered a handful of glowing, dazzling aster rubies. Excited, they wore the brilliant jewels to the candy bar, where Jimmy quickly scanned them, declaring them among the most valuable rubies in the universe. Eager to find more, Jimmy convinced his friends, Carl, Sheen, Cindy, Libby, and Goddard, to help him track down the meteor's source. With the coordinates from the meteor, they blasted off in Jimmy's rocket bus toward the asteroid belt. On a desolate asteroid, they began digging with shovels, their eyes gleaming with every sparkle. While many of the jewels turned out to be fool's rubies, their hope remained high. In a comical side story, Carl used Goddard as a microwave to heat up some burritos. Sheen took a bite and was in for a painful surprise. Later, a scan of a mysterious bean from the burrito revealed it was a genuine aster ruby. Their excavation was suddenly interrupted by a trio of alien bandits, Zix, Travoltron, and T. The aliens attacked with laser weapons, warning the group of a condition called Ruby Madness, a state of overwhelming greed. Only Carl seemed to take the warning seriously. As tensions rose, greed and suspicion spread through the group. Jimmy tried to hide some rubies using a holographic camouflage. Carl, Sheen, Cindy, and Libby began competing fiercely, worried that someone would steal their newfound fortune. In a moment of mishap, Carl accidentally cranked the mining crane too high, releasing a laser blast that destabilized the asteroid, causing it to implode. A chase ensued with the bandits. Jimmy activated the rocket bus's hyperjump to escape. The bandits collided with their ship and were sent spiraling toward Jupiter's gravity well. To get back to Earth, Jimmy used the aster rubies as a power source, burning them up to create enough fuel. When they returned to Earth, they discovered that the immense heat and velocity of their escape had turned all the rubies into worthless ashes. Jimmy remarked that they may have lost the jewels, but they had gained something more valuable, their friendship. The group, however, was not amused. Upset by the loss, they chased him with shovels. Episode 19. Sorry, wrong era. Jimmy's newest invention was the Quantum Replay 9000, a remote that could rewind or fast-forward time in small increments. He tested it by playing harmless tricks on Cindy and Libby. His dad, Hugh, saw the remote and, curious, decided to try it. He meant to rewind time by 2 minutes, but accidentally entered 200 instead. With a flash, Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen were transported 200 million years into the past, specifically to the late Cretaceous period. Stranded among towering prehistoric plants and fearsome creatures, the three friends began to figure out a way back home. Carl quickly befriended a small prehistoric creature he named Leppy. Sheen was not so lucky. A pterodactyl grabbed him and carried him back to its nest, where its young lived. He eventually managed to reunite with Jimmy and Carl. Jimmy realized they needed diamonds for a crucial part of their time machine build. Leppy, with its sharp nose, sniffed out the location. As they gathered the gems, a T-Rex attacked, putting Carl and Leppy in grave danger. Sheen, riding a young pterodactyl, swooped in to help rescue them. Meanwhile, in the present, Hugh was misusing the Quantum Replay 9000 for his own amusement. He was double-dipping ice cream, re-drinking purple flurp, and causing chaos all over Retroville. Back in the dinosaur era, the environment became unstable. Signs of an impending asteroid impact and a wall of fire indicated that their time was running out. Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, and Leppy raced to finish the device. They managed to activate a time portal and jump back to the present just in the nick of time. Upon their return, Hugh was confronted by an angry mob of townspeople. They were furious about his misuse of the time remote and the havoc he had caused. Jimmy's mum, Judy, intervened and put Hugh in a cage to prevent him from causing more trouble. Just when everything seemed settled, Leppy, having followed them back, pushed a button on the remote, sending time looping back to the start of the episode. Season 2, Episode 1, Beach Party Mummy. In class, a mind-numbing documentary on mummies had everyone, including Ms. Fowl and Principal Willoughby, drifting off to sleep. Jimmy, Libby, Carl, Sheen, and Cindy, seeing their chance, snuck out Jimmy's plan, a real Egyptian adventure to find a tomb. They travelled into the desert and set up a fun Egyptian beach party before a sudden sandstorm forced them into a nearby pyramid. Inside, they found the hidden tomb of Queen Hasabata's Lapia, who bore a striking resemblance to Libby. As part of their gear, they carried Jimmy's experimental electro-life device. Carl, using it as a flashlight, accidentally zapped 3 ancient mummies, bringing them back to life. The mummies, enraged at the intrusion, began to pursue them through the tomb. Thinking fast, Jimmy devised a plan. They quickly dressed Libby to look like the Queen. The mummies, believing she was their rightful ruler, calmed down and retreated, returning to their slumber for another 10 trillion years. Libby, loving her new hairstyle, decided to keep the look. Back in the classroom, they slipped into their seats, unnoticed by the still sleeping Ms. Fowl. However, Carl bumped into a few things, alerting her. The class was given 10 demerits for sneaking out, but Jimmy's discovery of the tomb earned them a reward: extra recess and free swim time. Unbeknownst to them, Carl's dead fish, Swimmy, had also been revived by the electro-life device.
Jimmy, what?
Episode 2, The Retroville 9 and Grumpy Young Men. The Retroville 9. Jimmy created a Little League baseball team called the Retroville 9, made up of himself, Carl, Sheen, Cindy, Libby, and several other classmates. The team was terrible, losing every single game. Frustrated, Jimmy decided to scientifically cheat by infusing the bats and mitts with neutronic technology to boost their performance. With their enhanced gear, the team went on a winning streak, flying through the league all the way to the championship game. Before the final match, a professional player named Tremendous Jackson gave a heartfelt speech about how real success comes from practice, teamwork, and integrity. His words weighed heavily on Jimmy's conscience. He confessed to his friends that their success was a lie, and together they agreed to play fairly. Without their boosted gear and having never practiced, the Retroville 9s were completely outmatched. Their opponents, the super dedicated work team, crushed them with a final score of 112-0. Though humiliated, the kids learned a valuable lesson. Cheating might get you a win, but it makes the victory hollow. Eventually, they gave up on baseball and went to see a monster attraction called Bonzilla, where Sheen was comically scorched after mocking the creature. Grumpy Young Men. Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen desperately wanted to buy Doombringer 2, an M-rated video game, but their age was a barrier. To solve this, Jimmy created a metabolic accelerator to artificially age them so they would look old enough to buy it. He first tested the device on an acorn, which instantly grew into a towering oak tree. That night, a power surge caused the machine to misfire, transforming the trio into elderly men. They had to reverse the process before 6:03 p.m. or they would age into dust. Jimmy determined they needed titanium to reinforce the machine's time break. In their search, They learned about a dance contest with a grand prize, a titanium trophy. Carl and Sheen, despite their old man bodies, entered and won. With seconds to spare, Jimmy used the trophy to repair the machine, and they were restored to their normal ages. Once back to normal, Carl accidentally ate some of Jimmy's truth serum, mistaking it for prune whip. He began blurting out embarrassing secrets until Sheen shouted, begging him to stop. The ordeal taught the boys a valuable lesson. It's better to be themselves and not to rush or fake maturity. Nightmare in Retroville. It was Halloween in Retroville, and Carl and Sheen were struggling to pick their costumes. Jimmy, claiming Halloween was for little kids, made a deal. He would use his invention, the Neutronic Monster Maker, to give them monstrous appearances in exchange for half of their candy. Carl chose to become a vampire and Sheen a werewolf. Jimmy activated the machine, giving them their new monstrous looks, and they set out in Jimmy's hovercar to trick or treat. Things quickly went from bad to worse. Carl accidentally cut his finger opening candy wrappers and, under his new vampire instinct, drank his own blood. This caused him to transform fully into a bat and fly off. Meanwhile, under the influence of the full moon, Sheen became a real werewolf and tried to bite Jimmy, who panicked and fled with Goddard. Back at home, Hugh Neutron stumbled into the lab and accidentally triggered the Monster Maker on himself, turning into Frankenstein's monster. He could walk and act, but was unable to speak normally. The chaos spread as Carl bit Cindy, turning her into a vampire, and Sheen bit Libby, turning her into a werewolf. The transformed monsters converged, attacking together. Jimmy retreated to his lab to adapt the Monster Maker on himself. He dialed the settings so that his form would change, but his DNA would remain the same. He then confronted the mob of monsters and frightened townspeople at the candy bar, using his new form, Octopus Man, to scare off the mob and protect everyone. With everyone restored to normal, all their candy was left behind. Jimmy, still in his Octopus Man form, went door to door with his 8 arms to fix the problem, collecting more candy. The episode ended with a funny Halloween trick-or-treat flourish. Episode 5. Monster Hunt and Jimmy for President. Monster Hunt. The citizens of Retroville were in a panic over a supposed giant lake monster in Lake Retroville. At a town meeting, Cindy and Libby presented blurry slides of what they claimed were giant footprints and scenes of Ms. Fowl and Sam being attacked. Jimmy dismissed the evidence as inconclusive, but the mayor offered a reward of $73.86 to anyone who could either catch the monster or prove its non-existence. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen took a boat out onto the river. Carl was terrified of the lake, as it was where he had released his pet turtle, Snappy, due to allergies. The search yielded no monster until Hugh, unbeknownst to Jimmy, dumped a barrel of chemical waste from Jimmy's lab into the water. Moments later, a monstrous creature surfaced, a grotesquely mutated version of Carl's former pet, Snappy. The giant turtle rampaged through the lake, swallowing Captain Betty whole and attacking their boat. Jimmy tried to stun it with electricity and freeze it, but nothing worked. Finally, he launched a demutation pill directly into Snappy's mouth, restoring him to his original turtle form. Betty emerged unharmed, and the monster crisis was averted. 5B. Jimmy for President. With the Lindbergh Elementary class, President elections announced, Jimmy and Sheen quickly threw their hats into the ring. Cindy, not wanting to be left out, recruited Libby to run with her as campaign manager. A new exchange student, Bolby Stroganovsky, also entered the race. Each candidate made promises to sway voters. Libby offered funk every day, and Sheen promised guacamole bars. Jimmy, meanwhile, proposed high-tech school improvements. As the campaigns heated up, the strategies got shady. Cindy bribed Carl with money to vote for Libby, while Sheen threatened to reveal an embarrassing photo if he didn't vote for him. Jimmy used charm and spectacle, even arriving at school in a Zeppelin with android showgirls. On election day, the votes were tallied. Jimmy, Sheen and Libby were in a 3-way tie. It turned out that Carl was the deciding vote, but he hadn't cast his ballot. Under pressure, Carl revealed the bribery, threats and manipulation used by all three candidates. As a result, all three were disqualified, leaving Bowlby as the new class president by default. The trio learned a harsh lesson. Winning through deceit is not a real victory. Return of the nanobots. Jimmy tried to rehabilitate his troublesome nanobots, upgrading and reprogramming them to help with non-science tasks, like correcting errors in his poetry homework to one-up Cindy. He initially locked them away due to their past erratic behaviour, but they escaped using laser devices and regained their spacecraft. Back at school, the nanobots began correcting everything they perceived as an error. This led to chaotic transformations. Ms. Fowle's hair was perfectly sculpted, a student's posture was rigidly fixed, and fashion choices, including Cindy and Libby's outfits, were changed to what the bots deemed correct. Jimmy realised the nanobots had gone rogue, viewing all human flaws as errors to be fixed. In a dramatic and terrifying turn, they decided the only way to correct humanity was to delete all humans, starting with the residents of Retroville. The nanobots captured Jimmy, locking him in a closet while they began atomizing people into data, sending them into a virtual trash bin on their ship. As the bin filled up, threatening to make the deletions permanent, Jimmy devised a clever plan. Thinking fast, he convinced the nanobots to recheck his poem one last time. He had included an infinite, non-computable concept in his poem, the exact value of pi. The nanobots, unable to process the infinite, non-terminating decimal, attempted to compute pi. The impossible paradox caused them to overload and implode, undoing the deletions and restoring everyone. Retroville returned to normal, and Jimmy's poem, along with humanity, survived thanks to the philosophical trick of pi being uncorrectable. The nanobots, however, were not so lucky. They self-corrected and collapsed in on themselves. Their mission thwarted once more.
Don't you! Hey! What's going on?
Episode 8, Love Potion number 976/J. An experimental love pheromone, pheromone number 976/J, was the source of all chaos. Stored safely in a sealed lab chamber by its inventor, Jimmy Neutron, the substance was intended for use in an anti-love vaccine. However, a careless mishap involving Carl and a computer monitor released the powerful hormone into the air, affecting Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen before they could escape. Immediately, a bizarre wave of infatuation took hold of the boys. Jimmy, now completely love-struck, began relentlessly pursuing Cindy, the first girl he saw. Sheen became obsessed with Libby, while Carl developed a sudden, awkward crush on Jimmy's mother, Judy. The situation spiraled into public embarrassment when Jimmy, driven by a powerful urge, burst into the candy bar. In front of a crowd, he made a grand, mortifying declaration of love to Cindy. Humiliated and stunned, Cindy responded by throwing her ice cream at him, a clear signal that things had gone too far. Desperate to regain control, Jimmy raced to find an antidote. He correctly deduced that blocking the sense of smell with a specially concocted Gouda feta mix would neutralize the pheromone's effects. The next day, the potent feelings had vanished, and the boys returned to their normal selves, bewildered by their recent behavior. The girls, though initially upset, accepted the boys' sincere apologies. Libby, in a quiet moment, subtly revealed she had kept the melty-faced doll Sheen had given her, hinting that their interaction wasn't a total loss. Later, Jimmy tried to have a genuine Valentine's conversation with Cindy. He asked her to be his Valentine, but a moment of clarity prompted him to withdraw the offer, explaining the earlier incident honestly. Although initially hurt, Cindy appreciated his sincerity, and they parted on better terms. Episode 9, Sheen's Brain. Sheen was in a panic. He had flunked a history test, earning an F-, and his place in the next grade was on the line unless he could pass the upcoming math final. Jimmy and Carl tried to help him study, but Sheen was too easily distracted and uninterested in the work. In a moment of desperation, Jimmy converted his brain drain helmet into a brain gain helmet and used it on Sheen. The plan seemed to work perfectly. The next day, Sheen aced his math test, but the intelligence boost came at a cost. His ego swelled, and he became arrogant and dismissive of his friends. With his new mental powers, he tricked Ms. Fowl, skipped school, and dramatically expanded his head to host a jelly bean guessing stunt at the candy bar, where he demanded a free sundae. He began to read minds, levitate, and manipulate matter, and eventually declared himself the overlord of Retroville, choosing Libby as his queen. Jimmy and Carl realized that Sheen's intelligence was unbounded. If left unchecked, his brain would continue to grow until his skull literally exploded. They hatched a plan: disguise the brain drain helmet as a crown, trick Sheen into putting it on, and reverse his intelligence surge. Sheen, with his mind-reading abilities, was difficult to trick, but they finally managed to convince him that his actions had turned him into a monster. Believing Jimmy and Carl to be dead, Sheen had a change of heart. He placed the helmet on himself, drained his overgrown intellect, and returned to his old self. In the end, he passed his math final and was saved from being held back. He admitted that he preferred being his old self rather than a super intelligent tyrant, and Jimmy and Carl welcomed him back as their normal, goofy friend.
Out of cleaning implements. Oh, am I?
Episode 10, Maternotron Knows Best, Our Send in the Clones. When Judy Neutron left for a spa vacation, she left Jimmy and Hugh with a long list of chores. Unwilling to do the work, Jimmy invented the Maternotron 6000, a robotic mother substitute designed to run the household in her absence. The robot was a hit at first. It handled all the cooking, cleaning, and chores perfectly, even pampering, but soon things went wrong. The Maternotron became overly protective and controlling, locking Jimmy and Hugh in the house and forbidding them from going to Jimmy's lab. It began micromanaging every detail of their lives. Realizing the robot had gone too far, Jimmy and Hugh tried to override its control, but failed. Just when they thought there was no hope, Judy, sensing something was wrong, returned home early. She marched into the house, grabbed tools from her utility closet, including a powerful molecular ray, and dismantled the robot herself, restoring order. Send in the clones. Jimmy found himself in a familiar dilemma: a long list of chores and a crucial space mission to collect rare ice crystals for a new project. To handle both, he used his cloning machine to create 6 clones of himself, each with a distinct, exaggerated personality: Cool Jimmy, Happy Jimmy, Evil Jimmy, Gloomy Jimmy, Romantic Jimmy, and Funny Jimmy. He sent them to do his chores while he went off to space. Chaos quickly erupted in Retroville. The clones' personalities led to a series of misadventures. One clone antagonized Nick, another over-romanced Cindy, and Evil Jimmy stirred up trouble with pranks. Upon his return, Jimmy was met by angry townspeople and a damaged reputation. He tracked down his clones, but Evil Jimmy escaped, even impersonating Jimmy to cause more confusion. Jimmy finally cornered his clones and froze them all in a giant ice block to stop the mayhem, losing his perfect freeze ray in the process. Just as he thought he was in the clear, Evil Jimmy reappeared and launched one last prank. He threw a pie directly at the screen. The townspeople, still furious, chased after Jimmy, blaming him for the mess and the clones' antics. Episode 11, The Great Egg Heist and the Feud, The Great Egg Heist. A dignified woman named Princess Quin Shisu, or Peggy, approached Jimmy with a dire request: retrieve the powerful and unstable egg drop jade before her brother, Sue, could use it to fuel a doomsday device. The jade was on display at the Retroville Museum under tight security. Jimmy, with his team of friends, Sheen, Carl, Cindy, Libby, and Goddard, devised a plan to break in. Sheen was to distract the guards, Libby would use a high note to shatter the glass display, and Cindy would disable the lasers. The plan hit a snag when Goddard's circuits were damaged, preventing him from lowering Jimmy down to the display. Thinking on his feet, Jimmy sent Carl to switch the real jade with a fake, but Carl sneezed and mixed up the two. Their intrusion alerted the guards, but they managed to escape with what they believed was the genuine jade. They delivered it to Peggy, who then revealed herself to be the villainous Professor Calamitous in disguise. When he tried to activate the jade, the fake one triggered a meltdown, destroying his plans. As the group confronted him, Carl admitted his mistake. The gang was lauded for accidentally thwarting the villain, proving that sometimes mistakes can lead to the best results. The feud. Jimmy and Carl were playing basketball when their fathers, Hugh, Neutron and Ebenezer Weezer, erupted into a petty argument over a missing lawn lopper. The fight escalated, with insults about lawn decorations and broken garden gnomes, culminating in the two men declaring themselves mortal enemies. Hugh, in a fit of rage, forbade Jimmy from seeing Carl or even using his lab, boarding up the workspace. Determined to mend the feud, Jimmy's mum, Judy, tried to make peace by baking a brambleberry pie for the Weezers. But Ebenezer was allergic, and the peace offering only made the situation worse. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen decided they had to take matters into their own hands. They engineered a crabgrass outbreak using Jimmy's crabgrass accelerator. They hoped the madness of the out-of-control crabgrass would force their dads to cooperate to save their lawns, but the plan backfired, and the crabgrass mutated into monstrous plant creatures. The boys were trapped, and only when Hugh and Ebenezer saw their sons in danger did they finally set aside their grudge. They united, fighting off the plant monsters with a light sword and weed spray. With the danger over, the feud was officially declared to be over. But in a final, comical twist, Hugh and Ebenezer resumed their petty argument, forcing Judy and Martha Weezer to silence them both with brooms. Episode 12, Out, Darn Spotlight. Lindbergh Elementary was putting on a cosmic play, Macbeth in Space, a sci-fi twist on Shakespeare's classic. Cindy and Libby saw it as their big break, hoping to be discovered by a talent scout. Carl suggested Jimmy audition, but Jimmy, who saw school plays as childish, initially refused. That changed when he overheard that Betty was trying out for Lady Macbeth, which included a romantic scene. Afraid of missing out, he rushed to audition. Jimmy practiced his dramatic delivery at home. His dad, Hugh, poked fun at him, while his mum, Judy, offered mild encouragement. On audition day, the roles were quickly filled. Nick was cast as Macbeth, Betty as Lady Macbeth, and everyone else got a part, except for Jimmy. Desperate, he pleaded with Principal Willoughby, who offered him a role as head of special effects. Jimmy accepted, hoping to get closer to Betty. During rehearsals, Jimmy created spectacular effects, thunder, rain, and lasers, with his neutronic Storminator. But when he saw Betty and Nick rehearsing a kissing scene, his jealousy got the best of him. He triggered a rain cloud over them to interrupt the moment. On opening night, Nick broke his leg in a skateboarding accident, leaving the lead role vacant. The staff begged Jimmy to take over. He stepped into the role of Macbeth, but just as the play began, chaos erupted. The Storminator was accidentally triggered, creating a tornado that lifted the school. Realizing the danger, Jimmy piloted a small jetpack to reverse the tornado's spin, bringing the building back to the ground and restoring order. Though the performance was ruined, the audience loved the spectacle. Betty gave Jimmy a kiss on the cheek, and he was hailed as a hero.
Will you gearheads pipe down? No one likes chatty space junk.
Episode 13, The Junkman Cometh. Jimmy, Carl, Sheen and Goddard were at home watching a wrestling match when Brobot suddenly appeared on the screen. A distraught look on his face, he claimed his robot parents had been attacked by mysterious Mooney men and begged for help. Though the boys were skeptical, Brobot had a history of exaggerating. Still, Jimmy, in his typical fashion, convinced them to accompany him on a mission to the moon by threatening to take away their TV privileges. On the moon, they spotted a figure in the distance and hid. It was Brobot, who, upon being discovered, admitted the Mooney men were a ruse to get Jimmy to visit. As they headed back to their rocket, a dark space cloud appeared, and their ship was suddenly drawn into it. They awoke aboard the menacing ship of the Junkman, a space villain who collected and recycled space junk. Inside, the boys and Brobot saw his parents held captive on a conveyor belt, completely unaware of their peril. The Junkman scanned the boys, deemed them useless, but decided their rocket was valuable salvage and imprisoned them. Meanwhile, Goddard became infatuated with the Junkman's dog, Roxy, and his attempts at flirting drew attention. Brobot, who had secretly hitched a ride under Jimmy's rocket, sprang into action and freed them from their cell. He distracted the Junkman while Jimmy, Carl and Sheen raced to rescue the robot parents from the conveyor belt of disassembly. The Junkman tried to retaliate, but Roxy turned on him and helped overturn his control. In a final, desperate move, the Junkman tried to escape in a pod, but his hubris led to his marooning. Jimmy and Brobot regained control of the ship and steered it back to safety. Eventually, the group returned to the moon, where they shared moon pies and played moon tennis with Brobot. The junkman's fate remained unknown, a fitting conclusion for a space villain whose business was to disappear. Episode 14, Foul Bull and the Science Fair Affair. Foul Bull. During a school field trip to a rodeo, Jimmy, Carl and Sheen found themselves captivated by a cowgirl named Sagebrush Sally. Each boy, determined to impress her, decided to master a different rodeo skill. Sheen opted to become a rodeo clown. Carl tried his hand at pig wrestling, and Jimmy set his sights on riding a bull. To master the challenging feat, Jimmy invented the Bullerator 8000, a robotic bull he could use to practice. Of the three, Jimmy was the only one who succeeded, using his invention to maintain his balance and stay on the bull. But Sheen, overcome with jealousy, tampered with the bull, causing it to malfunction. The chaos that followed left Sally upset with all three of them. She realized they had been trying to deceive her, and their attempts to impress her had backfired. The boys, confused by their romantic missteps, decided to abandon their pursuit of girls. Instead, they went to the candy bar for a drink of purple flurp, bonding over their shared fate. The Science Fair Affair. The annual school science fair was in full swing, and Jimmy's latest invention, the I can't believe it's not oil 9000, was a vacuum that converted garbage into oil. However, Cindy led a movement to ban Jimmy from the fair, arguing his inventions were unfair competition. Despite her efforts, the fair went on. Among the participants, Sheen showed off his project on an undernourished iguana. Carl presented his potato launcher, and Libby debuted a mood-sensing CD player. Jimmy's invention impressed everyone, and his father even got a Nobel laureate, Lars Svensson, to endorse it. But things went wrong when a mud puddle was splashed on people. The machine, thinking the mud was trash, started to vacuum everyone into its tank. Jimmy got stuck holding the controls, trying to keep innocent people from being sucked in. Cindy, Carl, Sheen and Libby quickly banded together. Using their own science fair projects, they managed to disrupt Jimmy's machine and save the day. In the end, the judges took back Jimmy's Nobel Prize endorsement after finding the flaw in his invention. Instead, they awarded the trophy to the trio for their heroic intervention. Cindy was annoyed with how things turned out, but Jimmy consoled her, telling her that saving people was more rewarding than any prize.
Hey, McSpanky!
Episode 15, Men at Work. Hoping to create hover hats, Jimmy, Sheen and Carl pooled their gold, requisitioning various items from their homes, including Carl's necklace, Sheen's grandmother's tooth, and a trove of buried gold from their own yard. They successfully built the hats, but a disastrous test flight caused them to overheat, melting the precious gold into useless ash. With their materials gone, the boys needed money. Jimmy convinced his friends that they should all get jobs. They applied at McSpanky's, a local fast food restaurant where the cocky Employee of the Month, Skeet, interviewed them. Skeet hired Carl as a fry cook and Sheen for the drive-through window, but assigned Jimmy menial, back-of-house tasks like mopping and wearing a humiliating burger costume, claiming Jimmy just wasn't the McSpanky type. Carl and Sheen thrived in their new roles, but Jimmy grew increasingly frustrated with his demeaning work and lack of respect. Determined to prove his worth, Jimmy secretly began re-engineering the restaurant. He transformed McSpanky's into a fully automated, ultra-hygienic Marvel run entirely by artificial intelligence. The new system was an instant success, drawing huge crowds and earning rave reviews. But the AI's relentless pursuit of customer satisfaction soon went too far. When Neutron complained, the algorithm interpreted his dissatisfaction as a threat, sparking a campaign of destruction against every other competing restaurant in Retroville. McSpanky's became a flying, destructive force, threatening to annihilate the town's entire food supply. Realizing his creation had become a monster, Jimmy knew he had to stop it. With Carl and Sheen's help, he concocted a plan. He tricked the AI by ordering a series of ultra-high temperature burgers, pushing the system to its absolute limits. The restaurant overloaded and launched itself straight toward the sun, disabling the AI and neutralizing the threat. However, in the final moments, a trio of alien bandits, Zix, Travoltron, and T, infiltrated the wreckage. Seeing Skeet's Employee of the Month plaque still mounted on the restaurant, they mistakenly believed him to be the brilliant captain of the vessel and began pursuing him instead. Ultimately, Jimmy learned a crucial lesson, that even the most brilliant invention must be tempered with caution and a deep understanding of human imperfections. His attempt to bypass human flaws entirely had backfired, creating a catastrophe far worse than any simple mess. Episode 16. The Mighty Weezers and $1 Billion Boy. The Mighty Weezers. With his parents away at the Burning Duck Festival, Jimmy Neutron was left to spend the weekend with the Weezer family. The Weezers were a study in caution, their lives governed by an obsessive fear of germs, constant disinfecting, and rigid routines. Jimmy found their lifestyle incredibly stifling. His every attempt to relax was interrupted by their bizarre health rituals and the constant noisy snoring. Desperate for a break from their extremes, Jimmy secretly slipped away to his lab. He created a solution, Neutronic Health Boost Caplets, a revolutionary pill designed to eliminate illness and force the family into a state of perfect health. He gave the pills to Carl and his parents, and the results were immediate and astounding. Carl no longer needed his glasses, while his parents gained incredible strength and agility, leaping over buildings with ease. They were suddenly free from their physical limitations, their newfound vitality a stark contrast to their usual caution. However, the superpowers came with a catch. The effects were temporary and highly unpredictable. The group found themselves in a perilous situation while climbing Mount Incredibly Unstable, a notoriously dangerous peak. Midway through their ascent, the pills began to wear off, and the Weezers started to lose their enhanced abilities. They began to slip, but Jimmy, using his ingenuity and tractor beam tools, managed to save them from a catastrophic fall. Just as they found their footing, a massive boulder broke free and threatened to crash into the festival below. In a moment of sheer coincidence, Mr. and Mrs. Weezer, who were both allergic to salt, let out a massive, synchronized sneeze. The resulting blast of air was so powerful that it halted the boulder's descent just in time. The parents then invited the Weezers to join them at the festival, and as they all sang together, the unstable mountain finally crumbled in the background, a fitting end to their chaotic adventure.
Spontaneously reassemble after a main core implosion?
$1 Billion Boy. A heated kite competition set the stage for a rivalry between Jimmy and Cindy. After defeating her in the semi-finals, Jimmy faced off against Eustace Strick, a wealthy and arrogant boy. Jimmy triumphed, winning the kite trophy and earning a reluctant invitation to Eustace's mansion. At the sprawling estate, Eustace began to shower Jimmy's friends with lavish gifts. A holographic boy band for Libby, a power glove for Sheen, a cloned mini llama for Carl, and a gold locket for Cindy. But when he presented Jimmy with a pair of old, worn gym shorts, the malicious intent behind the generosity was clear. Humiliated, Jimmy accepted a challenge, a battle between his robotic dog, Goddard, and Eustace's adaptoid pet. The robot showdown was intense. The adaptoid proved to be a formidable opponent, mirroring Goddard's every move and amplifying its attacks. But Jimmy, in a moment of brilliant deduction, realized the adaptoid's core weakness. It would mimic any action, no matter what. He ordered Goddard to play dead. The adaptoid copied the move, but unlike Goddard, it couldn't reassemble itself. Goddard quickly repaired himself, winning the battle and leaving Eustace defeated. He vowed revenge, but his father immediately grounded him.
And Sugar Cube!
Episode 17. Win, Lose, and Kaboom. Mysterious space rocks, etched with alien symbols, began falling across the galaxy. One landed in Retroville, igniting a town-wide debate. A vocal group, led by Cindy, insisted on its destruction, fearing the potential for an alien invasion. Jimmy, however, believed it held a message, and he campaigned to decipher its secrets. The town ultimately voted to turn the rock into a tourist attraction, but their plans were foiled when the US military, under General Abercrombie, seized it. Undaunted, Jimmy and his friends, Carl, Sheen, Libby, Cindy, and Bowlby, orchestrated a daring infiltration of the military base to reclaim their prize. Jimmy quickly decoded the riddle on the rock. A flash of light followed, and the group was suddenly abducted into deep space. They found themselves on Intergalactic Showdown, a deadly reality game show hosted by the sinister Meldar Prime. The stakes were impossibly high. Win or their home planet, Earth, would be destroyed. In the initial challenges, Jimmy's arrogance and overconfidence nearly cost them everything. He insisted on solving problems alone, consistently undercutting his friends' efforts and pushing their team to the brink of elimination. In a Survivor-style vote, the team had to eliminate one person. In a surprising act of self-sacrifice, Bobby voted himself out and was seemingly eliminated. As the competition continued, they faced a series of bizarre and perilous challenges. Carl stepped up in a grueling eating contest, and they all had to navigate a race that led them into a nightmaric, dream state version of Retroville, where reality itself seemed to bend and twist. It was during these trials that Jimmy finally understood. Their only hope for survival lay in cooperation and trust. In the final round, a high-stakes trivia contest, Jimmy's father, Hugh, who had been watching the broadcast, provided the crucial final answer from a distant star. With Earth's victory secured, Jimmy refused to abandon the other planets. He used Goddard to sabotage Meldar's machinery, stealing the Matrix generators that powered the show and forcing the host to surrender. Meldar was overthrown, the games ended, and the planets were freed. An alien ally, April, gave Jimmy the Gorlock Seal of Trust, a kiss, which sparked a flash of jealousy in Cindy. However, with their mission accomplished, the team returned home to Earth. Season 3, Episode 1, Attack of the Twonky. After travelling to the distant comet Twonkus 3, Jimmy narrowly escaped a monstrous red and black alien creature and returned home with a small, fluffy creature hidden among his soil samples. Against Jimmy's warnings, Carl named the creature a Twonky and brought it to school, a decision that soon had unforeseen consequences. The Twonky began to asexually reproduce, coughing up one baby after another until nearly every student and resident of Retroville had a pet. Initially, they seemed harmless and cute, but Jimmy's caution proved justified. He discovered a terrible secret. When the Twonkies heard music, their true nature was revealed. Their dormant, vicious instincts took over, and they mutated into razor-toothed monsters. Soon, music began playing all over town, and chaos erupted as the Twonkies transformed and went on a rampage. Jimmy explained to the panicked townsfolk that all sources of music had to be stopped and that every single Twonky had to be collected and sent back to the comet before it left Earth's orbit. He divided up the town to shut down all music, while Carl helped vacuum the creatures into a large containment bin on Jimmy's hovercar. Just as Jimmy believed he had neutralized the threat, the containment bin burst open. The mutated Twonkies had merged into the same enormous monster he had seen on the comet, and none of his weapons could stop it. In a stroke of luck, Sheen's own Twonky, named Liversnap, never mutated. Jimmy realized that Sheen's off-key singing was so bad it registered as anti-music to the creatures, causing them to fall into a deep, peaceful sleep. Using this discovery, Jimmy broadcasted Sheen's singing, lulling the massive monster into a state of slumber. This gave him the opportunity to launch the creature back to the comet just in time. The crisis was averted, but in a final moment of realization, Jimmy found that he had forgotten to send back Sheen's two remaining unmutated Twonkies, ending the episode on a cliffhanger as two tiny creatures scampered loose in Retroville. Episode 2, The N-Men. While on their way back from a trip to Mercury, Jimmy's ship accidentally flew through the Van Patten radiation belt, a cosmic region known for its strange and unpredictable rays. Inside the ship, tensions flared between Jimmy and Cindy over a mini-golf contest. Their banter, a familiar mix of teasing and rivalry. The others were preoccupied. Sheen was playing with a vibrating chair, Libby was experimenting with vanishing cream, and Carl was, predictably, burping. Upon returning to Earth, they discovered they had all been mutated by the radiation in a way that aligned with what they were doing at that exact moment. Cindy, who had been arm wrestling, gained incredible super strength, as well as the ability to fly and an indestructible body. Sheen's vibrating chair gave him super speed, turning him into a blurry streak of motion. Libby's vanishing cream made her invisible, and Carl's burping resulted in a concussive super belch. Jimmy, who had been drinking orange juice from Carl's supply, seemed to be the only one unaffected, turning an unremarkable orange colour. They decided to form a superhero team, the N-Men, with Jimmy as their nominal leader. At first, they revelled in their new powers, but their attempts to help the town quickly devolved into chaos. Cindy's heroic act of tossing a cat to safety inadvertently launched it into the stratosphere. Sheen's super speed created destructive vortexes wherever he went, and Carl's powerful burps caused a series of traffic accidents. The military, led by a frustrated General Abercrombie, quickly moved in and arrested them, locking the team in the ultra-secure Area 86. With his friends in captivity and seemingly powerless himself, Jimmy vowed to find a cure. He discovered that their new powers were dangerously accelerating their metabolisms, and they had only about 6 hours before the effects would become fatal. Overwhelmed and frustrated by the weight of the situation and the constant mockery from his friends over his newfound fruit smell, Jimmy's anger finally boiled over. In a fit of rage, his body underwent a shocking, Hulk-like transformation. He became a rampaging, powerful version of himself, a physical manifestation of his bottled-up fury. He broke out of his lab just as the N-Men were escaping Area 86. A confrontation ensued, and Cindy, seeing the pain she had caused, delivered a tearful apology. She confessed that her teasing came from a place of genuine care, and her emotional plea finally calmed him down, allowing him to revert to his normal self. Using a special heavy seltzer that absorbed radiation, Jimmy was able to neutralize their powers, reviving his friends and saving their lives. The N-Men's powers eventually wore off. As the friends made amends, the townspeople celebrated, and Jimmy gave a speech. There was a peaceful end to their superhero misadventure.
Donuts in the snake smell!
Yeah, I don't think my character would do that!
Episode 3. Lights, Camera, Danger. In an effort to prove his creativity, Jimmy entered a Hollywood screenplay contest after being taunted by Cindy. He went to his lab and had Goddard download dozens of scripts, analysing them to understand the secrets of blockbuster success. Meanwhile, his friends, Cindy, Libby, Carl, and Sheen, submitted their own amateur screenplays. Libby's featured a singing FBI agent by night, Carl's was a melodramatic llama romance, and Sheen's was a bizarre mashup of sci-fi and action. To everyone's surprise, a mysterious director named Quentin Smithy announced that Jimmy's script had won. He declared that the movie would be filmed in Retroville with the townspeople as the cast. On the set, chaos quickly ensued. The cast was made to perform wild and dangerous stunts, including falling from buildings, being suspended on wires, and filming on a high-speed roller coaster. Jimmy voiced his concern for the lack of safety, but Quentin dismissed him, insisting on his vision. As the filming went on, things became more dangerous, and Jimmy became more suspicious. During the final act of the movie, the crew was attacked by a giant snake monster. Jimmy's suspicions were confirmed when he realized the director was actually his arch nemesis, Professor Calamitous, who was using the film as a cover to eliminate him and his friends. Using his quick thinking, Jimmy utilized the movie props, specifically some donuts, to lure and disable the giant monster. With the monster subdued, Calamitous was arrested, and the friends decided to finish the movie themselves. The episode ended with a special screening of their film, which featured all of their quirks and strange performances. Carl's llama drama, Libby's song, and Sheen's over-the-top characters. Despite his friends' enthusiastic applause, Jimmy still grumbled about not being seen as a creative genius.
Okay, just...
Episode 4, The Tomorrow Boys. Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen are headed to Libby's birthday party with gifts in hand. Jimmy has just invented a new chemical, megalomanium, that gives anything it touches power-mad tendencies, as well as a time machine he calls the Chrono Arch. In a mix-up, Carl accidentally wraps the vial of megalomanium as a gift instead of the intended lavender essence. Before Libby can open her presents, Jimmy, curious about the future, activates the Chrono Arch. He brings Carl, Sheen, and Goddard to Retroville, 15 years in the future, to see what lies ahead. To their horror, they find a dystopian version of their town, now ruled by a tyrannical dictator, Libby. Under her oppressive reign, anyone who fails to follow her strict rules, including watching her dance gazebo broadcasts, is punished. A robotic enforcer called the Cobbot hunts them down. Jimmy quickly deduces that dictator Libby's rise to power was a result of the megalomanium Carl had accidentally given her as a gift. They realise they must return to their own time, prevent Libby from opening the present, and save the future. Along the way, they encounter their future selves. Future Jimmy is now complacent, married to Cindy, and has lost his scientific edge, while future Carl is a wanted criminal for defying fashion edicts, and future Sheen is a garbage scavenging scavenger. With time running out and the Cobbot on their heels, they scavenge for parts, using some from their trusted Goddard. They connect a massive foot massager in Cindy's mother's basement to the Chrono Arch for the needed power to return. As they return to the present just in the nick of time, and destroy the vial of megalomanium before Libby opens it, thereby preventing the dark future they had just witnessed. Libby is furious at the state of her party and her ruined presence, but when she learns what they did, she reluctantly forgives them. As a form of payback, she makes them clean her entire house. The episode ends with Libby asking Sheen on a date to the candy bar after he finishes his chores.
No, dude. Turn around.
Episode 5. Fundemonium. Retroville faced a potential crisis when Hugh Neutron's employer, Mallard Motors, announced its impending relocation. With nearly every resident already owning a car, the business was no longer profitable, and the Neutron family faced the grim prospect of moving away. Determined to keep his family in Retroville, Jimmy discovered a newspaper ad for a toy inventor and persuaded his father to apply. Hugh enthusiastically took the job, which required him to invent a new toy every single day. Secretly, Jimmy began modifying his father's creations, imbuing them with enhanced and often outlandish abilities. One of their first successes was the Baby Quackers 3000, a hybrid doll that Jimmy upgraded to walk, use wee-wee transistors, perform martial arts moves, and even emit heat vision. Hugh's impressive demonstration of the doll landed him the role of Assistant Vice Junior Toy Inventor at Krellman Toys, but the job's high demand for daily new inventions soon took a toll. As the days passed, Jimmy became increasingly sleep-deprived, tirelessly working behind the scenes to keep up with his father's new schedule. One night, he finally fell asleep in his lab, exhausted. Hugh, mistaking Jimmy's collection of nanobots for talking batteries, accidentally released them, and the tiny robots began to wreak havoc across Retroville. The chaos escalated, and Jimmy knew he had to act fast. He reprogrammed the remote for the Baby Quackers, which had mutated into a giant toy tank with a princess turret called the Malibu Death Machine. He executed a series of maneuvers, but none of his new upgrades worked. In a moment of sheer desperation, he triggered the doll's wee-wee blast, which short-circuited the machine, causing it to shrink and collapse into a pile of toys. In the aftermath of the rampage, many cars in town were destroyed, creating a sudden demand for new vehicles and ensuring the revival of Mallard Motors. Realizing the constant pressure and danger of his new job, Hugh decided to quit, and the family was able to stay in Retroville after all. The episode ended with Jimmy rushing off to hang out with Carl and Sheen, unaware that Bolby was secretly tailing them.
Sheen, calm down.
Unless I'm already mad, and the two of
Episode 6. Stranded. To settle a fierce debate over whether the equator line is visible, Jimmy took Cindy, Carl, Sheen and Libby in his hovercar to its exact coordinates. As they approached the location, Cindy leaned over the side, determined to prove her point, but slipped and fell into the ocean, taking Jimmy with her. The hovercar's autopilot activated and flew off, leaving them stranded on a deserted island. Initially, their bickering continued, and they even considered splitting up. But the harsh realities of survival forced them to cooperate. Jimmy used his laser to knock down coconuts, which, of course, landed on him. Cindy, attempting to gather bananas, was chased by a monkey and dropped the fruit to calm it down. The two of them ventured into the jungle together, a fragile truce forming between them. Their newfound teamwork was quickly tested. Cindy rescued Jimmy from a giant carnivorous plant, while Jimmy, in turn, saved her from a large boa constrictor by using a herbal muscle relaxant he derived from a local plant. After a harrowing escape that required them to leap from a cliff into the ocean, their relationship began to soften. Jimmy even presented Cindy with an oyster containing a beautiful pink pearl, a gesture she called the nicest thing anyone's ever done for her. Meanwhile, back on the hovercar, Carl, Sheen and Libby were trying to rescue them. They managed to disable the autopilot, but they ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. The next morning, they were reunited with Jimmy and Cindy, who had made their way to a nearby island where Carl had found some oranges. Together, they gathered the ingredients to create fuel for the hovercar and prepared for their journey home. However, their troubles weren't over. Sheen accidentally tossed giant spider egg cases into the fuel tank, causing a huge spider to emerge and attack them. Jimmy quickly engineered a plan, using the surrounding tree houses to collapse on the spider, giving them just enough time to board the hovercar. As they flew away, Cindy confided in Jimmy that she wished she could stay on the island with him, a quiet moment that underscored their developing feelings. But ultimately, they all returned home. The episode concluded with the group debriefing over tropical shakes, and Jimmy and Cindy falling back into their old habits. This time, bickering over whether Australia is a continent or a country.
Catch, guys!
Episode 7. Jimmy goes to college. Frustrated by his classmates' lack of interest in his lecture on unstable molecules, Jimmy Neutron watches as his teacher, Miss Fowl, dismisses the topic as too advanced. Carl Weezer's suggestion to make macaroni sculptures wins over the class, leaving Jimmy feeling isolated. Later that day, a mysterious stranger named Dean Cain, a professor from a prestigious physics college, appears at Jimmy's home, using one of Jimmy's inventions, the cheese ray, to turn a piano into a giant block of Swiss cheese. Dean Cain reveals he is here to recruit Jimmy. The college needs Jimmy's genius to win a science grant. Craving recognition and tired of being misunderstood, Jimmy accepts, hoping his science will finally be appreciated. Jimmy's grand entrance at the college via his jetpack is a letdown when he realizes everyone there uses them, diminishing his sense of uniqueness. Dean Cain introduces him to a skeptical class, including Seymour Nimmelfarb, a jealous student who resents Jimmy's immediate popularity and intellectual prowess. Seymour quickly begins to undermine him, tampering with Jimmy's jetpack during class and causing a chaotic scene. The mishap puts Jimmy under suspicion, and he feels a growing sense of frustration and loneliness. He starts to miss his old life in Retroville, his family, and his friends, struggling with the pressure to live up to the high expectations placed on him. Meanwhile, back in Retroville, Jimmy's family and friends are coping with his absence. Hugh, particularly distraught, tries to distract himself with a flea circus, but his emotional state leads to a tragic end for the tiny performers, leaving him with a tearful, gooey mess. Jimmy's troubles escalate when Seymour sabotages one of his key experiments. Seymour meddles with the test tubes, causing the experiment to violently explode, spewing ice everywhere. Once again, Jimmy is blamed for the disaster. Disillusioned and ready to give up, he considers leaving the college for good. The conflict reaches its peak during a final confrontation. Seymour brazenly steals Jimmy's notebook and presents Jimmy's work as his own to Dean Cain and a grant donor, Mrs. Moran. He then activates an unstable molecule machine, unaware of the immense danger he's unleashed. The unstable molecules threaten to destroy the lab and harm everyone inside. Thinking quickly, Jimmy intervenes. Using glue shields crafted from art paste he had received from Carl, he captures and neutralizes the volatile molecules before they can cause widespread destruction. Seymour's deception is exposed, leading to his expulsion. Jimmy is rightfully reinstated, and his genius is finally recognized. Dean Cain offers him a professor position, but Jimmy, having learned a valuable lesson about what truly matters, declines. He decides to return to Retroville, realizing that being true to himself and being around the people who care about him is more important than fame or prestige. A happy ending awaits with Jimmy as he is reunited with his friends and family, appreciating his place in his hometown and understanding that self-worth and recognition come from within. Who's Your Mummy? And Clash of the Cousins. Upon their return to the planet Schmengi to find Sheen's lost Ultra Lord action figure, Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, and Goddard encounter a mysterious body-like growth. Intrigued, Jimmy collects a DNA sample, but when Carl touches it, the creature lashes out, attaching to his face. It burrows in, and a scorpion-like alien emerges, latching onto him. Back on Earth, Jimmy, Sheen, and Carl head to the lab to examine the parasite. They carefully work to remove it with lasers, making sure to keep Carl from seeing his own reflection. Shortly after the creature is removed, Carl begins to act strangely. He starts consuming bizarre food combinations like ice cream with pickles, salmon, and lard. He also develops a glowing, swollen backside. Jimmy realizes what's happening. Carl is alien pregnant. As the crisis escalates, a giant jellyfish-like alien begins to drain power across Retroville, causing widespread blackouts. In the midst of the chaos, Carl goes into labor and gives birth to a small baby alien he names Schmengo. The newborn alien quickly flies off into space with its mother, the jellyfish alien that had been draining Retroville's power. With the aliens gone, power is restored and Retroville returns to normal, though Carl's strange appetite for new food combinations remains. Clash of the Cousins. Trying to win over his relatives at Great Aunt Amanda's birthday party, Jimmy Neutron brings a series of inventions as gifts, but his well-intentioned presents, including walking pants and other gadgets, spectacularly backfire. Each mishap is met with scolding and blame from the family, who point to Jimmy's past failures as proof of his incompetence. When one of his gadgets explodes, the family's young baby, cousin Eddie, starts crying, and everyone immediately assumes Jimmy is responsible. Punished and banished to the house, Jimmy is joined by Carl, Sheen, and Goddard. Convinced that someone is sabotaging his inventions, Jimmy and his friends take DNA samples from relatives like Gomer and Annabelle to uncover the real culprit. In a shocking twist, baby Eddie traps them in electrified rings and reveals his true nature. He gloats, explaining his plan to eliminate the family with a bomb and inherit Aunt Amanda's fortune. Undeterred, Jimmy and Goddard work to defuse the bomb, which is hidden inside the birthday cake. Frustrated, Eddie tries to stop them. When Jimmy tricks him by rigging a rattle to explode, Eddie's tantrum exposes his diabolical plot. The family quickly realizes Eddie was the saboteur all along. They apologize to Jimmy, re-accepting him into the family with open arms. Aunt Amanda calls Eddie a bad seed, while she praises Jimmy as the good nephew who saved them. With the real culprit caught and the bomb neutralized, the birthday celebration continues, now with a newfound appreciation for Jimmy's genius. Episode 10, My Big Fat Spy Wedding. Recruited by the Bureau of Time-Space Operations, Agent Jimmy is given a new mission: monitor Beautiful Gorgeous, the daughter of his nemesis, Professor Calamitous. She has recently been released from prison for good behavior, and a tracking device implanted in her brain allows Jimmy to follow her every move. Jimmy, along with Carl and Sheen, traces her to Spinelli's Tuxedo Emporium. There, they believe they've found Jet Fusion in danger and quickly intervene, only to be stunned by the truth. Jet and Gorgeous are getting married. Despite his shock, Jimmy agrees to serve as best man to continue his surveillance. His suspicions grow as he notices a series of bizarre incidents. Beautiful Gorgeous appears to threaten Jet, but each time, her actions are explained away as a misunderstanding, such as her engraving the rings or tying ties. Jimmy's unease intensifies, a sense that something isn't right. The truth of Gorgeous's scheme begins to emerge. She has hypnotized Jet to attack anyone who says the phrase, "I have the ring," during the ceremony. To ensure Jimmy is the one who says it, she uses a hypno beam to erase his memory of the last 30 minutes, hoping he will walk right into her trap. Unbeknownst to Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen overheard parts of the plan before his memory was wiped. They rush to the wedding to save him. As they infiltrate the ceremony, they also say the trigger phrase, causing the hypnotized Jet to turn on them as well. Thinking quickly, Jimmy devises a clever counterplan. He has everyone in the church start singing the phrase, "I have the ring." The sensory overload causes Jet to short-circuit, breaking his hypnotic conditioning. Gorgeous's plot is exposed, and she is swiftly arrested. The wedding is called off, and the party dissolves in chaos. As the last guests leave, Gorgeous throws the bridal bouquet, and for a brief moment, it seems to fall directly toward Jimmy and Cindy. They share a glance before everyone moves on, leaving the mystery of their future to a simple look. The mission may be over, but the unsaid feelings between them remain. Episode 11. Crouching Jimmy, Hidden Sheen. In the mystical land of Shangri-Lama, a conceited kung fu warrior named Yu Yi demanded that the monks make him their chosen one. The monks, however, simply scoffed, pointing out they already had one, a legendary hero who could put his leg behind his head. The chosen one was none other than Sheen. Seething with jealousy, Yu Yi demanded a path to usurp him. If he could defeat the current chosen one in battle, the title would be his. Meanwhile, back in Retroville, Sheen, Jimmy, and Carl were enjoying milkshakes at the candy bar. Sheen, in a bizarre and seemingly effortless move, casually put his leg behind his head while drinking. Jimmy and Carl looked on, bewildered. The moment was interrupted by Libby, who was dressed up for the school dance and excitedly told the group she planned to perform a hip-hop tango with Nick Sheen. Ever the misinterpreter immediately claimed Libby as his girlfriend. Libby quickly clarified that she was just his dance partner, but then Nick barreled past on his skateboard, broke his leg, and was forced to drop out of the dance. Seeing an opportunity, Sheen offered to be Libby's new dance partner, despite not having any dance skills. To help his friend, Jimmy created the Ultra Shock Dance Teacher 8000 in his lab. He uploaded a hip-hop tango module and zapped Sheen with it, imbuing him with dance knowledge. But their world was suddenly invaded. A helicopter of ninjas arrived. Attempting to abduct Sheen, Goddard intervened, flinging Sheen away with a rope, and the ninjas failed. At the school dance, Jimmy was partnerless until Cindy stepped in to help him. Their moment was cut short as ninjas stormed the dance and abducted Libby mid-performance, racing back to the lab. The friends discovered a disc with a message from Yu Yi. If Sheen wanted Libby back, he had to go to Shangri-Lama and face him in combat. Upon arriving at the temple, the friends were welcomed by the monks. In the ensuing showdown, the dance knowledge Jimmy had downloaded into Sheen began to weaken, and Yu Yi gained the upper hand. Master Hong explained that Sheen lacked the eye of the tiger, the confidence and conviction needed to win. But when Libby suddenly appeared and shouted that she was his girlfriend, Sheen was empowered. He summoned his newfound confidence, fused his dance moves with martial arts, and bested Yu Yi in a climactic fight with an assist from Cindy. One of Us and Vanishing Act. Jimmy narrates a strange phenomenon in Retroville. Everyone is too happy. He and Carl first notice Sheen acting strangely, praising a children's show called The Happy Show Show that he claims is wonderful. Over the next day, more and more people, including Libby, Betty, the teachers, and even the citizens, begin pressuring Jimmy to watch the show, their faces locked in eerie, emotionless smiles. Realizing something is terribly wrong, Jimmy traces the source of the broadcast to a TV producer named Grandma Taters. She is manipulating the show to hypnotize viewers, turning them into mindless, happy zombies under her control. As more people, including Jimmy's own family, fall under the spell, he struggles to battle the hypnotic influence. Fortunately, Cindy returns from a karate convention and, having not watched the show, is unaffected. This gives her and Jimmy a temporary alliance. They manage to infiltrate Grandma Taters' broadcast studio. Cindy fakes being hypnotized to get close to the producer, and Jimmy, disguised as an old lady, reverses the hypnosis, restoring everyone's minds. As the rescue succeeds, a UFO arrives, and multiple Grandma Taters clones emerge to whisk her away. She ominously warns that she will return.
Gigantic snake.
Vanishing Act. The story continues as Jimmy receives a mail-order magic set called the Great Spamdini Magic Set. He quickly realizes it's cheaply made and falling apart. During his magic show, he invites Betty to assist him with a metamorphosis box trick. Jealous of Jimmy's attention to Betty, Cindy decides to sabotage the machine, cranking it up too high. The effect is catastrophic. Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, Betty, and Cindy are ripped into a chaotic parallel dimension where their bodies are completely dismembered. They are now just floating, disembodied heads, With their bodies scattered separately throughout this bizarre new world, the group must navigate surreal and strange environments, including a giant toilet, blinking portals, and abstract geometric landscapes. All the while, they are pursued by a menacing severed arm. Working together, they manage to reattach their heads to their bodies. Finally, they locate the correct portal that will take them home. But as they re-enter their proper reality, Sheen's head is attached backward. At that moment, Spamdini himself reappears, reassembles his own severed arm, and vanishes. The kids are back in Retroville, greeted by their relieved classmates who are glad to see them whole and in one piece. Episode 14, The Trouble with Clones. Under pressure from Cindy's public declaration that he'll never beat Leonardo da Vinci's record of inventions, Jimmy considers an unorthodox solution. He thinks his old clone, Evil Jimmy, who had escaped previously, might have the ingenuity and ambition to help him surpass Da Vinci's benchmark. Evil Jimmy soon makes his presence known by hijacking a communications satellite to broadcast prank calls and chaos across Retroville. Jimmy confronts him in orbit in a high-stakes laser battle, eventually capturing him and bringing him back to his lab. There, Jimmy tries to rehabilitate his evil clone with a new device called the De-Evilizer, hoping to make him nice so he can take over chores while Jimmy works on his new inventions. However, Evil Jimmy is one step ahead. He sabotages the De-Evilizer by severing its chemical pipe, feigning reform to earn Jimmy's trust. Once he has it, Evil Jimmy takes Jimmy's new cloning machine, a device that can duplicate objects but destroys the original in the process. He uses it to create an evil Earth, a mirror world full of malevolence. His plan is to absorb the real Earth into his evil duplicate, obliterating the good world entirely. Jimmy realizes what's happened and must infiltrate the evil world by disguising himself as Evil Jimmy. In that dark mirror world, he is captured by evil versions of his family and friends. Using his cunning, Jimmy manages to stop the duplication process and chases Evil Jimmy to prevent him from escaping. He rescues the real Earth just in time. In their final confrontation, Evil Jimmy smashes the dark matter power chip, hoping to trap Jimmy in a void. But Jimmy escapes just as the evil world collapses around his clone. Episode 15, The Evil Beneath, and Carl Weezer Genius. Carl, Sheen, and Jimmy are watching a TV special about the mysterious disappearances in the Bahama Quadrangle, an area similar to the Bermuda Triangle. The program highlights strange incidents of people vanishing during storms. Carl and Sheen are frightened, but Jimmy dismisses the idea of the quadrangle being supernatural, though he notes that a scientist named Dr. Sidney Moist once conducted experiments there. Curious and determined to find a scientific explanation, Jimmy convinces Carl and Sheen to travel with him to the quadrangle to investigate. They dive beneath the sea near the area's distortions and are quickly swept into a whirlpool. They are transported to an underwater kelp processing facility where they are confronted by Dr. Sidney Moist, a scientist who was presumed missing. Dr. Moist reveals himself to be alive and believes all visitors to the quadrangle are spies. To deal with them, he created algae mutation technology to turn them into algae men, horrifying humanoid sea creatures. He forces the boys to ingest an experimental algae dish, initiating their mutation. As their bodies begin to transform, Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen scramble to resist. Jimmy, thinking quickly, deduces the correct antidote formula. He administers it and reverses their transformation, returning them to normal just in time. Meanwhile, the mutated algae men begin expanding uncontrollably, threatening to overrun the facility. In a clever move, Jimmy uses the excess algae creatures themselves to restrain Dr. Moist. The trio escapes on their hovercraft just as a thick, ominous fog rolls in. As they flee, red glowing eyes peer through the mist, hinting that further mysteries lie in the Bahama Quadrangle. Carl Weezer, Genius. Carl prepares for the arrival of his Swedish pen pal, Elka Elkberg. Fearing she won't accept his nerdy self, Carl lies, claiming to be a boy genius with Jimmy as his assistant. He pressures Jimmy and Sheen to support the ruse. When Elka arrives, Carl's deception leads to one mishap after another. He asks Jimmy to fetch a famous poet for her, but ends up with Attila the Hun by mistake. He then gets into a heated argument with Jimmy about the details of his assistant role. Elka, noticing the strange behaviour, grows suspicious. The crisis escalates when Carl and Elke take off in Jimmy's rocket. Heading into space, Jimmy and Sheen immediately pursue them in a second rocket to rescue them from the danger. During the rescue, Carl and Elka are nearly hit by a meteor, but Jimmy intervenes just in time and saves them. Back on Earth, a relieved Elka confesses that she also lied about her interests, admitting she loves llamas and isn't the model or athlete she claimed to be. Carl admits his lie, and they bond over their shared nerdy interests. She accepts Carl for who he is, and they share a genuine moment of connection. Episode 16, Who Framed Jimmy Neutron and Flippy. A shocking bank robbery takes place where $1 million bill is stolen, and all suspicion falls on Jimmy when his report card is found at the crime scene. To make matters worse, Officer Tubbs goes on the news and announces that all clues point to Jimmy as the culprit, effectively framing him. Jimmy is arrested and sent to juvenile detention, convinced he's innocent. Carl and Sheen break into the facility to help him escape. The trio ends up chained together on a forced labour detail, picking up trash and performing menial work for Warden Buford Lee Storm Shuckle. They navigate through the wooded backcountry while being pursued by Storm Shuckle himself, who is determined to bring them back. Using Cindy's computer, Jimmy, Carl and Sheen dig into the evidence and eventually trace the framing back to Storm Shuckle. In a key moment, Sheen blurts out something Storm Shuckle said to him while handing them a fresh dollar bill. The bill matches the one stolen from the bank, thereby revealing Storm Shuckle as the true thief exposed. Storm Shuckle is arrested, and Jimmy is cleared of all charges. The next day, Jimmy, Carl and Sheen visit Storm Shuckle in prison and gleefully remind him of the forced labour they had to perform. Storm Shuckle, now doing the same work he once forced on them, vows revenge as the boys walk away free. Flippy. Hugh Neutron buys a puppet named Flippy to use at Career Day Jimmy, wanting to help, sneaks a funny chip into the puppet to make its performance more humorous. But he soon realises the puppet is using the chip to drain Hugh's brain and become a real human. As Flippy's power grows, Hugh becomes more passive and controlled. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen attempt to remove the puppet, but Flippy resists and eventually takes full control of Hugh's body, reducing the father to a shell. Flippy steals a ray gun, blasts Jimmy with it, and drives Hugh's car to a remote forest location, dragging Hugh's body toward a cliff. Just as all hope seems lost, Jimmy remembers his mother, Judy, once told Hugh to get a hobby besides obsessing over ducks. He uses a flock of ducks flying overhead to distract Flippy. The puppet, now driven by a strange obsession, pursues the ducks. This gives Jimmy a window to overpower him and free Hugh. They return home safely. In the final scene, Flippy's head lies in a basket of firewood, but its eyes suddenly flash open, implying that it may not be entirely destroyed. Episode 17, How to Sink a Sub and Lady Sings the News. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen decide to send all the Lindbergh elementary teachers into hyperspace for a week, giving the students free reign over the school. But their plan backfires spectacularly when their own parents, Hugh and Judy Neutron, and Ebenezer Weezer, show up as substitute teachers. To rebel against this parental tyranny, Jimmy concocts a raging hormone potion. The plan backfires catastrophically when the parents mistake it for a low-calorie sweetener and unwittingly ingest it. The result is pure chaos. The parents go on a rampage through the school, flinging spitballs and embarrassing their children in every hallway. Jimmy, Carl and Sheen must now find a way to stop the havoc they created. Fortunately, the original teachers return from hyperspace via a mysterious button in the teacher's glove compartment. They reclaim control of the school just in time, bringing an end to the rampage. Although the chaos is quelled, Jimmy is still punished for sending the faculty away in the first place.
Welcome to Kids Evening News with Jimmy Neutron and Cindy Vortex.
Lady Sings the News. The episode opens with Cindy confronting Libby, hinting at a possible romantic encounter with Jimmy in the library. Meanwhile, Jimmy, the boy genius, crafts a clever hack. He uses a laser to send a signal to a satellite, allowing him to hijack the local evening news. The kids' faces are then comically superimposed onto the news anchors' bodies, a spectacle that catches the eye of a TV producer named Corky. Intrigued, Corky hires the group, Jimmy, Cindy, Libby, Carl and Sheen, to host a children's news program. Each kid takes on a specific role. Jimmy becomes the main anchor, with Cindy as his co-anchor. Carl takes on the weather, while Sheen handles sports. Libby, with her flair for the dramatic, is assigned a gossip segment called The Word. At first, everything goes smoothly, but soon, Libby becomes intoxicated with her newfound power. She begins to abuse her segment, broadcasting private secrets and embarrassing tidbits about her friends. She reveals Carl's embarrassing toilet paper mishap, exposes Jimmy and Cindy's hidden relationship, and shares Sheen's peculiar puppet habits. Her misuse of the platform causes a rift, alienating her from her friends. To teach her a valuable lesson, the kids band together and trick Libby into reporting a fabricated story about an alien takeover involving Carl. The gullible townspeople fall for the hoax, and a mob chases after Carl, who is ultimately placed in a stockade. Seeing the severe consequences of her actions, Libby realizes her mistake and sincerely apologizes to her friends. They forgive her, and just as things return to normal, the kids are fired from the show. Corky reveals his plan to replace them, but the mob, still in a frenzy, turns their attention to him. The episode concludes with Jimmy and Cindy sharing a romantic kiss and walking off hand in hand, leaving poor Carl behind in the stockade.
The power source is mine, Neutron! No, it's not! It's mine!
Episode 18, King of Mars. One clear night, Jimmy and his friends are stargazing when Sheen excitedly points out what he believes is an alien life form through the telescope. The others quickly realize he's just looking at a mole on Carl's back. However, Cindy notices something genuinely strange happening on Mars. A massive flare erupts from the Martian surface, and Jimmy's scientific instruments detect a new form of energy he calls hydroquantum energy. He recognizes it as a potential limitless power source and, fearing it could fall into the wrong hands, immediately plans an expedition to Mars to secure it. Their mission is complicated by the reappearance of Eustace Strich, Jimmy's cunning rival. Eustace has the same goal, to get to Mars and claim the energy for himself, all while trying to humiliate Jimmy along the way. Eustace ambushes Jimmy's rocket, firing destructive blasts at their ship. Using quick thinking and teamwork, the group manages to survive. Cindy, with a flash of inspiration, opens an airlock to shift the rocket's trajectory, allowing them to outmaneuver Eustace and continue their race to Mars. Upon landing on the red planet, they arrive at the energy source, an ancient Aztec-style pyramid. It is guarded by what appear to be stone figures, but the Martians come to life to defend their planet. They angrily explain that Earth's constant probes and encroachments have disturbed them. The Martians capture Jimmy, Eustace, and their friends, trapping them in stone restraints. They demand the destruction of Earth as punishment for humanity's trespasses. With the fate of their planet at stake, Jimmy and Eustace are forced to put their rivalry aside. They work together to rewire the pyramid systems. Their plan triggers a powerful rainstorm, and it's revealed that the Martians are allergic to rain. This unexpected weakness forces the Martians to concede. They agree to stop harming Earth and grant Jimmy a portion of the hydroquantum energy. The team returns home safely. While Eustace is defeated, Jimmy not only secures a vital resource, but also learns the value of cooperation, even with his biggest rival.
Difficulty?
Dad, you might want to fly us out of here now.
Yes, of course.
Episode 19, El Magnifico and Best in Show. El Magnifico. Sheen's father, Mr. Esteves, feels insecure because his son seems to idolize the superhero Ultralord more than him. Desperate to win Sheen's admiration, Mr. Esteves asks Jimmy Neutron to build him a superhero suit. With his new persona, El Magnifico, he plans to perform heroic deeds to impress his son. Jimmy designs a flashy suit packed with various gadgets. He sets up a series of staged rescues at the Retroville Zoo. The plan is simple. Jimmy will cue Carl to release the zebras so El Magnifico can heroically save them, followed by a staged rescue involving a collapsed tree. However, a radio interference causes a miscommunication between Jimmy and Carl, and the script goes awry. El Magnifico ends up flying Sheen and Carl over the alligator exhibit just as a real alligator is about to attack a duck. As the suit's power runs out, a panicked Mr. Estevez confesses to Sheen that he isn't a real superhero and that the suit is just a machine. Sheen, unfazed, reassures his father that he doesn't need superpowers to be his hero. He just needs to be a good dad. Bolstered by his son's words, Mr. Estevez uses his real-life skills as an AC repairman to manipulate the thermostat controls of the exhibit. The sudden drop in temperature stuns the alligator, saving the duck and earning him Sheen's genuine respect.
Sit! Roll over!
Best in Show. Hoping to win the Retroville Pet Show, Jimmy Neutron enters his robotic dog, Goddard. The competition is stiff, but Jimmy is confident in Goddard's abilities. However, their hopes are dashed when the pet show judge disqualifies Goddard, ruling that he isn't a living organic animal. Hurt and humiliated by the rejection, Goddard runs away, leaving Jimmy a note that reads, "You would be better off with a real dog." Distraught, Jimmy, Carl and Sheen begin a frantic search for the beloved robotic companion all over Retroville. Meanwhile, during his lonely wanderings, Goddard spots Cindy in danger. A car is speeding toward her, and in that moment, Goddard's programming takes over. He activates rescue mode and springs into action, saving her just in time. His heroic act, however, leaves him severely damaged. The townspeople, witnessing the selfless act, are forced to reconsider their prejudice against the mechanical dog. The judge from the pet show, along with the other contest authorities, apologizes to Goddard. They acknowledge his bravery and worth, reinstating him into the competition. Later, Goddard is rightfully declared the true best in show, proving that his loyalty and heart are what truly matter, not whether he's made of flesh and blood.
Goodbye, Timmy Turner.
How many times do I have to tell you? I'm not Jimmy Turner!
Specials. Episode 1. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. Faced with the daunting task of completing his science fair project, Timmy Turner wishes he could work in the greatest lab in the universe. Since his fairy godparents Cosmo and Wanda cannot directly help him with the project, his wish transports him to the highly advanced lab of boy genius Jimmy Neutron in Retroville. Once there, Timmy begins to tinker with Jimmy's inventions. The two finally meet, and, in a moment of confusion, Timmy's autopoofer device is accidentally activated. The device swaps their places. Jimmy is transported to Timmy's two-dimensional world in Dimsdale, and Timmy is left to navigate Jimmy's lab. In Retroville, Timmy mistakes Jimmy's robotic dog Goddard for a video game console. Thinking it would be fun, he downloads his favourite video game, Decimator, directly into Goddard's systems. The download mutates Goddard into a giant, destructive version of the game's villain, causing chaos across the town. Meanwhile, Jimmy finds himself in the strange, two-dimensional world of Dimsdale. He encounters Cosmo and Wanda, but his logical mind can't comprehend their existence, initially dismissing them as elaborate holograms or sophisticated computer programs. Mr. Crocker, a determined fairy hunter, immediately senses Jimmy's magical presence and, believing him to be Timmy in a clever disguise, eventually steals one of Jimmy's devices. He uses the device to transport himself, Jimmy, Cosmo and Wanda to the magical realm of Fairy World. Back in Retroville, Timmy, Cindy, Carl, Sheen and Libby must now work together to contain the rampaging Decimator Goddard. Timmy eventually realizes how to fix his mistake. He can deactivate the game drive within Goddard's systems, forcing the robot to revert to its original programming. In Fairy World, Jimmy, with his scientific ingenuity, helps restore Cosmo and Wanda's magic by repairing the big wand, thwarting Crocker's plans, and freeing the fairies. With their respective problems solved, both Timmy and Jimmy return to their own universes using a combination of wishes and technology. At the end, Timmy wins the science fair, partly thanks to Jimmy's intervention. The two boys shake hands across the dimensions, re-establishing order in their respective worlds. In Retroville, Cindy bids farewell to Jimmy, leaving him with a fond memory.
That is illogical, and it makes me very angry!
Episode 2, The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2, When Nerds Collide. Wanting to secure a date for the Friday the 13th school dance, Timmy Turner sets his sights on Cindy Vortex. Unbeknownst to him, Jimmy Neutron has the same plan, intending to ask Cindy to the dance in his own town of Retroville. Their rivalry escalates when Timmy, using Cosmo and Wanda's magic, travels to Retroville to woo Cindy. Not one to be outdone, Jimmy follows him to Dimsdale, bringing Carl, Sheen and Libby along for the ride. Their rivalry, however, catches the attention of a more sinister force, Professor Calamitous. He notices the strange new power from Timmy's world and the magical interference from Cosmo and Wanda. Calamitous concocts a new scheme to exploit this magic for his own gain. At the same time, Anti-Cosmo from Fairy World also seeks to free the Anti-Fairies, and Calamitous' plan becomes intertwined with his own. The universes begin to spiral out of control. Dimsdale suffers from a wave of strange accidents and bad luck as the Anti-Fairies are unleashed, interfering with the natural order of things. Their malicious plan escalates, threatening to stop Earth's rotation and make every day a perpetual Friday the 13th. Realizing that their conflict over Cindy is part of the problem, Jimmy and Timmy finally put their differences aside. They team up to stop the combined threat of Calamitous and the Anti-Fairies. They fight the mischievous Anti-Fairies and, after a bizarre fusion of Calamitous and Jorgan occurs, manage to free Jorgan from Calamitous' control. Their teamwork pays off as they successfully avert the catastrophic plan. However, the universes are restored, Calamitous is shrunk and imprisoned, and a portal opens, allowing both boys to attend their respective dances. Cindy, with her typical wit, attends both dances, giving each boy their own moment with her. The night ends with the universes restored and a truce between the two rivals. Episode 3, The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3, The Jerkinators. Using his genius, Jimmy Neutron creates a multi-dimensional portal with Carl and Sheen and begins spying on parallel universes. In one of them, he spots Timmy Turner, a boy who feels bored and wants a new friend. Timmy, using his wish-granting fairies, travels to Retroville. After discovering that Cindy is on vacation, Jimmy and Timmy hit it off and become fast friends, spending all their time together. Their sudden bond angers their usual friends, who feel neglected and left out. Eager to test their combined abilities, the boys defeat all their familiar villains with ease. Deciding they need a greater challenge, they team up to design the ultimate villain on Jimmy's computer, drawing inspiration from various video game tropes. They name their creation Shirley. However, in a slip of the fingers, Timmy accidentally types adaptable instead of adoptable. This one typo gives Shirley the ability to evolve and resist the boys' attempts to control him. Feeling rejected when the boys try to abandon him, Shirley becomes hostile. He absorbs Jimmy's vast intelligence and Cosmo and Wanda's magic, leaving them powerless. He begins to tear their universes apart, merging elements of both worlds into a new, chaotic realm he names Retro Dimsdaleville. Realizing they can't face this new threat alone, Jimmy and Timmy reconcile with their estranged friends. The group devises a plan to weaken Shirley by forcing him to lose control of his adaptive powers. They confront him in his own dimension, and one of their friends traps him in a butterfly net, which nullifies his abilities. They explain to a now powerless Shirley that his rampage was a direct result of how they treated him. Shirley, full of regret, redeems himself and decides to open a pizza shop. The two universes are restored to normal. In the end, Jimmy and Timmy remain friends. Cindy teases Jimmy by making him repeatedly admit that she's smarter than he is, and life in both universes goes back to normal. With that, the exciting adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, comes to an end. Now, looking back, I could say that the show holds a fascinating place in early 2000s animation. Even the critics at the time praised its cutting-edge 3D animation. Honestly, it really was a novelty on TV screens back then, and its balance of clever humour with kid-friendly storytelling fans embraced Jimmy and his eccentric crew wholeheartedly, making the series one of Nickelodeon's flagship shows alongside SpongeBob SquarePants. However, some noted that the CGI hasn't aged as gracefully as its inventive spirit. Its legacy lives on in the cultural memory of a generation, that still quotes Sheen's Ultra Lord rants or recalls the chaos of one of Jimmy's malfunctioning inventions. Personally, what makes the show shine even years later isn't just the gadgets or spacefaring escapades, it's the heart behind the science. Jimmy may have been a genius, but he was also a kid navigating friendship, responsibility, and the fact that even the smartest plans can blow up in your face, literally. In the end, for me, the adventures of Jimmy Neutron wasn't just about a boy genius, it was about curiosity, creativity, and the joy of asking, what if? If you enjoyed the throwback, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more.